So, Russell, it is just great to see you. Great to be connecting here with you here on Zoom, our miracle technology, to discuss Tommy before he ever moved out of Sioux City. And I'd first like to start with you, maybe talking a little bit about how your own being a musician developed in Sioux City in terms of when you got your first drum kit, when you first started getting serious, and how you were able to then start playing out with people.
Um, Come from a family of musicians. My grandfather was a trumpet player. My dad was a drummer, and both my brothers played instruments. One was a trumpet player, and the other brother was a saxophone player. And so that's how it all started. My dad would, do gigs and stuff like that, and take me to the rehearsals and stuff like that. So I've been doing it all of my life. I didn't decide to be a professional musician until in my teen years, and so that was my interest in it. It kept me out of trouble, and the guys that my age and older that I would gravitate towards were Tommy was in that group, and that was active in the community and playing music and was a great musician. Even back then, you could see the potential that he had something special in his sound and his playing and just his enthusiasm for music. And so gravitated towards guys like that and John Bartle and some other guys around. Pretty small community in Sioux City, speaking of the music community. So we all had a chance to cross paths and get together and jam and do some gigs and stuff, and so that's pretty much how it started, how I started.
So, do you remember when you would have felt confident enough from having? Did you take drum lessons? Was it like?
I did, yeah. My dad, and it was smart, him being a professional drummer, he played with the Ink Spot some years ago, and he didn't want to be my teacher, although I would just watch and listen. But he got me a private teacher when I was in middle school, and then my private teacher was also my band director in high school. So I had, formal lessons growing up.
So, when might have been the first time you actually played in a public, even if it was just a small room, a club, whatever? When was the first? How old were you when you first felt confident enough, had some chops to where you played out?
Yeah. It was at my grandfather's club. Had a nightclub called Club 711 there in Sioux City on the west side, and it was a musician's hang. So all of his buddies that would come through town, and some of the great musicians like Stimsy Hunter and Preston Love out of Omaha, Nebraska, were his buddies, and they would come down and play. And so, God, I don't even remember. I was really young. He would give me a chance. He was my encourager. My grandfather bought my first drum set. My dad didn't want me to be a musician, but my grandfather encouraged me and bought my first instrument and just started playing in my grandfather's club. And my grandfather was still doing some gigs, and my dad was his drummer. And I remember I was, I don't know, 13 or 14. My grandfather allowed me to sub for my dad when my dad couldn't um, make a couple of gigs. So I had a couple of gigs that I played like around 14 in my grandfather's group.
So, do you remember being nervous?
Oh, I was totally nervous, and They were all much older, older guys, mature guys, and excuse me, yeah, I was totally nervous. He, they were all had their whiskey in their flasks and their horn cases and stuff like that. My grandfather would sit with me on the breaks to make sure I wasn't doing anything bad, kind of thing. My early recollection was, like I said, his buddies were Stimsy Hunter, who was multi instrumentalist, but he was played in with Electric Flag. He was in Paul Butterfield's band, blues band back there in the day. Great bass player, great musician. I really loved him, Stimsy. And Preston Love, who was a bandmate of my grandfather's in Count Basie's band. And he had a great radio show in Omaha. And those guys, I like, they were such great musicians that I really looked up to them and hung out around them as much as I possibly could.
So, do you have a recollection on the first time or two? Anybody? How are the guys supporting you, or giving you approving looks, or maybe oops looks, or what? How quickly were you able to just join the groove?
Yeah, my my grandfather would have me just play time. He's look, don't play any fills, just play time, and that's going to give you your foundation kind of thing. So it was quarter notes on the bass drum, four on the floor, kind of thing. He wanted to instill in me a sense of playing good time, and he said, "That's it. That's what, like in a big band situation, you want that, kind of thing." So I did that for, maybe I didn't want to do that, but that was what he was one of my inspirations, and sort of wanted to be like my grandfather and stuff. And he was a businessman, and he was a pretty serious guy about music, and so I anything that he said I did or tried to do, and the guys around him would give me tips on what to play, what not to play, kind of thing, just to add to the music and not be chaotic and play a bunch of stuff. Back then, they call it the old school. So guys would, and that's not for everybody. I teach now, and I try not to teach the old school way, whereas they can be hard on you and hurt your feelings sometimes. If they didn't like what you were playing, or they would tell you so in such a way that would either hurt your feelings, and sometimes that crushes young people to where it's like, I'm don't want to feel this way. I never want to do this again. Or it's, I don't want to feel this way, and so I'm going to get better at doing what I need to do to play with others, kind of thing.
So what might have been? Do you have any recollection of what might have been that kind of Russell kind of kind of thing? What might have been said to you?
Um, I remember being, get up, we have another drummer. That said it all. It's like I'm just not doing it, kind of thing. And that's motivation there to, it's like, you know what, I hate that feeling. I don't want to feel that way ever again. What do I need to do to, so they got my attention. That gets my attention to want to do things right, and that respect of wanting to um, play in a way that people like to play with you.
So I would assume they would think you were a good listener and that you were actually responding.
Yeah, that makes all the difference. Yeah.
And so back then in Sioux City, how many clubs were there? Beyond, was there any beyond your grandfather's that would have jazz or blues or
Mhm.
have a be a place where other black musicians would be able to play?
Yeah. Then my grandfather's club, then, and I think he had a couple of different clubs. He had all the music connections, so that he sort of was able to make that work, and it was a popular place to go. So that was for some years, got and but uh, there was one in particular, and I know Johnny Bolin can help me on this on the name of the place. Can't recollect, but it was after my grandfather's club. So my grandfather passed away, and the club closed down, and then there was another music club up the street from where my grandfather's club used to be, and the guy, his name was Wardell, and I forget the name of the club, but he's carried on the thing of having music 7 nights a week, and he started hiring out all of us young guys. So Johnny, uh, Tommy, Bartle, some other guys in Sioux City at that time. We played regularly at his club, so it was primarily a black club. It was in the west side black section of town there, but everybody was welcome. The music was featured, and um, and so that was a great little scene. We had a place to play. We had a home. It was home. It was someplace to play.
So what year did your grandfather die? When did his club when he passed, I guess that was when it closed. When was that? Do you remember which year?
Okay, guessing it was like around. I think it lasted up into the early 70s, maybe 1970, 71, something like that.
So that then was until that happened. That was this kind of cocoon for you young guys to get a chance to get in there
Yeah,
and connect with these musicians.
yeah.
So, do you have a sense of when you met Tommy?
So we were in school at the same time. We were the same age. He went to a different high school, but like I said, the music community in Sioux City was small, so everybody knew each other. Um, uh, Everybody knew Tommy from some of the popular Sioux City bands that he played in. Patch of Blue was one popular band that I can recall right off the top of my head that he played in with the Larwick brothers, and I really loved Tommy's thing that he had, kind of thing, and it was he was so much into music and all kinds of music, and he was like a sponge. And uh, because my grandfather had music at his club, we kind of that's how we became friends. Was he wanted to come down and check it out and play? And the great thing about my grandfather was he opened up a place to play and welcome young musicians in. And we weren't even of the age to get in there legally to the club, but he allowed us to get in there and play, kind of looked after us, mentored us, gave us a place to play, kind of thing. And Tommy, I remember there were just a few guys that would come down, and Tommy was one of those guys that would come down and play and regularly um, for the period of time before Tommy left Sioux City.
So Johnny the other night mentioned early on when he was like 14 that he was in Harlem's Children.
Mhm.
Do you remember that group?
I don't remember the Harlem's Children. Um, no, I don't remember Harlem's Children.
Because I think that might have been before Patch of Blue. But I'm not sure.
Yeah,
So so when Tommy so I guess it's just like now, a musician who's really into it is going to figure out where they can go play.
Exactly.
They're going
Yeah.
to have their ear to the ground.
Yep.
Oh, and then they would hear that your grandfather, he would hear, I'm sure, that your grandfather's club.
Yeah. There wasn't that thing of and so so we're talking 60s, and that thing of with some of us that we just it was all about the music, so it wasn't about race kind of thing. uh, some of the guys like Tommy, it was chancy to come down to the black section of town and hang out and play, and but that was the only reason why we were there, was the music kind of thing, and all the other peripheral stuff that was going on we really didn't pay that much attention of. There were I have an oldest brother, and who played, he also was a drummer, and so Tommy was working with a little bit with my oldest brother and an organ player who was the oldest son of one of my dad's buddies, and they had a group that they played with, Harold Smith. And so Harold Smith Jr. and my brother was junior, had a group, and Tommy played with Harold and my brother during that time. And actually, I believe that's how I met Tommy, was through them and some of the groups that they had, and Tommy was um, playing in some of those groups. So they were playing um, R&B and some jazz kind of thing, and their music was more R&B jazz influenced kind of thing.
Do you remember a name or an incarnation of them?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a name?
Yeah, I got a poor recollection of that, Michael.
It's okay.
The one group that sticks in my mind was the two best guitar players, in my estimation, were in Sioux City during that time, was Tommy and John Bartle. And so they would play, if Bartle wasn't in the group, Tommy was in the group kind of thing. Um, the Blazes
Ah,
was the band with Harold Smith, and my brother was in that band, and Bartle was in that band, and I believe Tommy might have been uh, in there, in some form at some period of time.
so let's say you wound up. Do you have a recollection of the first time you were there when Tommy played, like a first impressions of what you wound up seeing him up there playing? You could walk in the room, whatever it was, and do you have a recollection of what you thought about him as a player?
It was probably, and I'm sure I saw a Patch of Blue, and it was probably I saw Tommy play for the first time before Patch of Blue, but I can't remember what group that was. I do remember Patch of Blue, and they were very popular in Sioux City, and they played around a lot, and got a chance to go hear Tommy, and we were all friends, and the Larvick brothers and stuff like that. So um, I I mean, Tommy had a special thing early on, even, that everybody really noticed that there was something special about Tommy, about the way he played, about his his openness just to things, and also his dedication to what he wanted to do. He knew what he wanted to do.
So, do you have a sense of was he manifesting that at 14?
Yeah,
Because yeah, he would have left like right when the not that far after being 14.
yeah, because he was. I don't know if he was 16 when he left. I'm estimating that was like around 16 years old when he left Sioux City
Might have
for
been either
Denver.
right before or after he turned 16.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
because I believe it was the winter, because that's when Jeff's story picks up.
Hmm.
And it was a cold, snowy night in Denver.
Hmm.
And when Tommy had just gotten there. So it must have
Yep.
been, I'm assuming, and Johnny can maybe help, right after he had turned 16. Although there's some perspective that maybe it would have had to have been the year before, though. He would have had to have just turned 15. It's one or the other.
Okay, because I know he didn't finish high school, and
Right.
it was like he'd already decided music is this has got to work because I'm all in, kind of thing. And I believe it was 15. I didn't want to say that because I'm not sure, but I think the timeline is about right. And you can corroborate that with Johnny and some other people.
So then, how long had you known him, would you say, or experienced him as a musician before he left?
God, I would say a good 4 years, something like that, to be safe, kind of thing of playing
Like
around at 15. So, I
11,
mean,
11,
it's hard
12?
to, it's hard to because we started early. 12 definitely we were all playing at 12, 13 years old and doing gigs and stuff like that. High school gigs, whatever there was to do. We were club gigs. We were doing club gigs, um, whatever there was to do.
So he you guys may have played in your grandfather's club when he was 12, potentially 13.
Yeah, because I was around 12 when I started playing in my grandfather's club.
And was Tommy around then, or was it shortly thereafter that you would?
Shortly thereafter, yeah,
So yeah, that would mean 12.
yeah.
So I think so much isn't known about how developed Tommy was. What was he playing? I know Patch of Blue was kind of a band sound.
Mhm.
I'm assuming there's some that's kind of it. I've always been curious about him, soloing. When was he? Do you remember him at 12 already commanding the stage with taking a solo?
Yeah, so what I was impressed with Tommy. So we had a group of a couple of guys that were kind of. There was one guy named Clark Lewis, and Tommy was real good friends with Clark. Clark was a little older than us. Clark had a library of the blues that was incredible. And we would go over to Clark's parents' house and sit and just listen to. Clark turned us on to all the blues artists, all of the early old blues artists. I mean, he was really aficionado, and he was a young guy too, but really knowledgeable. There was his brother, Steve Lewis. So that's how I got together with Tommy was through the Lewis brothers. Now it's coming back to me, and it was all centered around getting together over at Clark Lewis's house, listening to the blues. And so that is the thing that I think made Tommy stand out among guitar players was, and especially rock players, was his he came from the blues in his soloing. It was, and you can hear that in his playing is that blues influence in his playing. I used to say that if it doesn't have the blues in it, I can't use it. But Tommy really had a command of the blues, and his when he got out of Sioux City and went to Colorado and started branching out there and playing with different people, he even got even more blues influence because now he was starting to see guys coming through Colorado, Muddy Waters, and all the blues artists, and Tommy was definitely there, absorbing it all.
So at 12, 13, the blues is known obviously as an emotional format.
Yeah,
and the great players are able to convey the emotion that is
yeah,
implicitly in the blues. Was
yeah.
Tommy able to manifest that voice at 12 and 13?
Tommy had an incredible ear. Um, that was his asset. Um, in such a way that he would go because he really didn't take formal lessons, I don't think, but he was playing stuff that a lot of the guys that were studying and taking formal lessons and stuff like that weren't playing. You know, his thing was all from his ear, from what he absorbed and what he felt. You know, was his emotion. Um, he he paid attention. It showed in his playing. He was doing that even at an early age. He had a distinctive sound. I believe it came from his influences that were different from just the. I know he was a big Elvis Presley fan, but he also loved the blues, and he absorbed that in his sound.
So he would then be playing the blues. All of a sudden, it comes time for the guitar player to solo.
Yeah,
And so he would, at 12, 13 years old, would the crowd, would the whoever was in the club notice? Were they like reacting? And
yeah, absolutely. And I can remember like the group that I remember him playing in, Patch of Blue. We weren't a blues band, you know, but Tommy brought a different sound to that music kind of thing. In Sioux City, there was a thing, we used to call it the Sioux City Shuffle. So in blues, there's a lot of shuffles. And so we were all really into playing shuffles, you know, back then. Even Tommy, you know, we called it the Sioux City Shuffle. Felt that we had our own brand, our own way of playing a shuffle kind of thing.
so, how often would you say, and there's no way for you to probably have an exact number, but how many times would you say he was the guitar player, you were the drummer in whatever, whether it's a jam or a band or whatever it was, where you guys were laying it down and doing songs?
Mhm. You know, never was in a band with Tommy in Sioux City, but at jam sessions and things like that, mostly.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
so how about those? Let's just talk about
okay.
just. I'm going for just your own, because obviously it's so interactive, and when musicians are inspirational back and forth, it just creates this thing.
Yeah.
The thing occurs and happens, and that's kind of what I'm looking for here. Is just you having early remembrances when you did jam with Tommy.
Yeah.
Did you feel
So
more pulled or more, or there was something special going on?
I felt like he was a guy that I wanted to play with, you know. He was a guy that I enjoyed playing with because there was just more. He was had something different in his style of guitar playing. Um, two guitarists that okay, three that I really loved in Sioux City and loved their playing. Tommy was one who was probably one of the first guitarists, and then a couple of others after that. So uh, I didn't get in a band with Tommy until much later. I moved to New York. I was living in New York City, and Tommy would come out quite quite often to New York. And whenever Tommy would come out, um, I would see, he'd give me a call and we'd hang out. We had a mutual friend uh, uh, that we'd all get together and hang out. And Tommy said, "Hey, why don't you come to Colorado and join my band?" And so it was like taking a chance. It was an opportunity, and so that was the first time I had an opportunity to play in a band and play some regular date gigs and with Tommy.
So
But that was later on.
let's back up into that New York situation. So were you able to get yourself situated, or you were playing at all out when you moved to New York?
I wasn't playing all that much, but I was playing a little bit, kind of thing. And so I had an opportunity to. There was a band called Dreams, and the lead singer for that band was a guy named Eddie. I forget Eddie's last name, who I knew a little bit. Um, Asked me, they needed a drummer, I guess for a casual or something. We call them casuals, private party or whatever. I forget, a wedding or something, you know. So I said, yeah. And he said, well, here's the address of the loft down in the village. You know, come down there. So I did. And so the uh, it was Billy Cobham. I was subbing for Billy Cobham. And I walked in the door. Nobody else was there. Billy was playing. And I had a Dreams album that I had gotten in Sioux City. So I knew who these guys were, and I was totally floored. But that was my first uh, meeting with Billy, and played that one date with for subbing for Billy Cobham. I was scared out of my mind because he asked me, well, he got up from the drum set and he gave me the sticks. Oh, you're subbing for me? Yeah. We'll play something, you know? And it was like, and after hearing him just play, it was like I was so intimidated, but I did the best I could. And he said, yeah, you can play. He goes, you should get some experience. That was his advice. So,
So who was that mutual friend?
his name was Eddie. The mutual friend that Tommy would come to
Yeah.
see.
Yep.
Philip Palamini and James Palamini.
Ah, Philip.
And they used to live in Sioux City. And they were my buddies, and as well as Tommy. So we all kept in touch. And Philip and Tommy were really close. And so we all hung out whenever Tommy would come to New York City. I think he invited me to Electric Ladyland. He was recording there, something like that. Hung out with him then.
Do you remember what year that was? When did you move? First of all, when did you move to New York?
God, that was all like early 70s, maybe like 73 or something like that. 72, something like that.
Because I know he went to New York before that, and I
Yeah,
wonder if that was because of Philip.
yeah.
But Kenny Passarelli has a story about. I think it was when Zephyr was happening, when Tommy and Kenny went to New York and stayed with Jeremy Steig.
Jeremy Steig, yeah. And Eddie Gomez,
Yep,
Don Hammer.
yep. And then Jeremy had just done the album Energy,
Yeah,
which is of course where the band name Energy came from.
yeah.
So that's fascinating. So Dreams was still happening then in '73 or so, because Cobham's on record saying that's when he first saw Tommy play. He said it was in '69.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was the Watkins Glen Festival, but it
Mm-hmm.
was one of the big festivals where there were so many of them exploded in '69,
Yeah,
and that's when he first saw Tommy. He was in Dreams,
yeah,
and Tommy was in Zephyr.
yeah.
And that was where Billy first went, what?
Yeah.
And so
And
this is fascinating that you're part of that New York. I didn't
mhm,
have that awareness.
yeah.
So do you remember any gigs or him playing out at any of the clubs? I know they played Slugs, and or was this before you went to New York, perhaps?
Uh, I don't think when uh, I don't recall. I used to go to Slugs a lot, but I don't recall ever seeing Tommy there.
Well, it was
It
on one
was
of those few trips. There was one or two
just a
trips.
trip when he would be out recording or something like that, and we'd get together when he had some downtime and hang out.
So I know that Cobham, I think it was there were a couple songs that we wound up putting out through the archives that were demo sessions at Electric Lady,
Hmm.
and Cobham had gotten a demo offer from Columbia. So the songs were Billy, Tommy, Yan, and Jeremy, and maybe
Hmm.
Eddie,
Hmm.
Sister Andrea, and another song. And they didn't get the deal. And I guess Billy, this would be interesting to go over this with Billy. I think then he then got a deal to do Spectrum. And did you watch all of that interview, the whole thing with
I
Narada?
did. Yeah.
Him going to his brain finally just went, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's when they reformed and Narada would have come in. And that's when I always thought that Billy wanted to do something more accessible with Spectrum.
Hmm.
And it turns out that he didn't want to recreate Mahavishnu.
Yeah.
He wanted to do something. But that just blew my mind. Narada's trying to get him to talk about MO,
Right.
as Billy said. And he goes, wait, well, before that, and actually it happened after that, he had to talk about Tommy first.
Yeah.
So part 2 of that exists, and I guess that's going to be put out. And I'm assuming then he will go even more into talking about Tommy.
Yeah.
But, anything more about being in New York there? I mean, did you go to the studio?
I did. And so maybe now, because you kind of have a timeline, I remember going to Electric Ladyland. Tommy was recording there. So maybe that was with Cobham. Tommy invited me to the session. Myself and Dennis Kelly, we were roommates there. Um, Hung out with James and Philip. So maybe that was the session with Billy Cobham, although I don't remember that for
If
some
we sit here
reason.
long enough, it may come up because, because you were obviously already so. It has to be somewhere recessed in the old closet in the
Yeah.
back of your mind.
Yeah.
Who were you seeing Tommy
Yeah.
record with?
Yeah. You know, I was I was thrilled that Tommy had hooked up with those guys, Jeremy Steig, Jan Hammer, Eddie Gomez, who was the bassist with Bill Evans for a bunch of years, and jazz players. They were jazz players. I mean, back then they weren't just jazz players, right? I mean, a lot of times we get pigeonholed as like if you're out playing rock, it's like that's all you play, or you're a jazz player and that's all you play, kind of thing. And uh, those guys weren't like that, and they brought Tommy in to their circle, which was uh, all the premier New York guys then who weren't well known at the time, and who became, you know, very well known international virtuoso musicians who were some very deep cats musically.
Well, now you're forcing my hand. I'm going to have to see if I can do this with Jan because this is the kind of and Philip, I guess, is the missing link in terms of
Yeah,
really perhaps having the whole timeline. And of course,
absolutely.
he's not available
Right.
anymore. Is his brother?
I haven't heard from James and since I left New York. I would hear from Philip, but I hadn't heard from James, and so I don't know. I don't know.
Because now this whole New York thing is like you've just stoked it up into the embers are getting hotter. How did that all when did that start? And again, it may have been if Philip. Do you have any idea when Philip left? Was his dad in the military? Was that the
I don't
thing?
recall that, but I
I
know
think
they
that
lived
I
for a
think
period
that's
of time in Sioux City, and maybe his
right.
dad was in the Air Force because there were Air Force bases
Yeah,
around in the
but he
Midwest there.
but he was from New York. Is that
Yeah,
so? Then after that, he must have gone to New York. But you're saying they were already buddies in in Sioux City.
yeah.
Um, so I guess I want to go backwards here, back into the club situation with your grandfather's club and whatnot. So the blues piece, you've been really clear about how that was a
Mhm.
real inspiration. What about Tommy playing jazz?
I never thought of Tommy as a jazz player, but he had jazz influences is because he heard it and he would try things. And that sounded more like jazz than it sounded like a rock thing, which made him interesting to me because uh, I was, my dad and my grandfather were jazz musicians, and being grown up in that music kind of thing, most of the guys back then were strictly into rock and roll kind of thing. But there were just a few guys who were listening and checking that out, and wanting that influence in their playing. And Tommy was one of those guys, obviously, because of the way he played. You know, I always think that that's what made Tommy special in the rock scene, and the way he soloed and his expression and what he had to say in his guitar. It came from the blues, but in my estimation, it came from the blues in a rock style.
And I'm fishing for that he would have at least been playing songs that were associated with jazz in
Mm-hmm.
some of those jams
Yeah.
at certain times or whatever. That somebody would say, "Let's do whatever it would have been." And then you
Mm-hmm.
you talked about the night at your grandfather's club where there wasn't a headliner. So at that point, the you guys, quote unquote, you guys, and I don't know if that was the night in particular, but you were there where
Yeah.
they're up on stage playing, and can you tell that story about how then your grandfather went and got the trumpet? What would have drawn him to go do that, and maybe see if what all you can remember there in
Yeah.
terms of that
So
story.
any uh, thing that you hear that is like, it's like that's it. It's the groove, or it's someone playing a really nice, meaningful solo, or something like that. Something special about the music, and at that moment, um, uh, that my grandfather, if the band was cooking, if he was working, whatever he was doing, and the band was cooking, because he always had an ear on the music, whatever he was doing, he would just disappear into his office and then come out of his office playing. And it always made us all laugh, but because it was such a funny thing to see, but it was like his signature thing of, yeah, the music is happening, and he wanted to get parts of that, and there were a few nights when he would come out of his office, trumpet in hand, playing a solo. He'd start his solo in the office and come out and play, kind of thing, and there was interplay going on. So uh, I believe, and I never talked to my grandfather about that. Wish I had, before he passed away, like what he thought about Tommy, because he certainly liked him. He certainly recognized that Tommy had something.
So can you kind of maybe try to recreate what might have been the night you witnessed that one time in terms of what was going on in terms of
Yeah,
here's you come in the door or you're already there, and then and guys wind up being on stage playing.
yeah.
If you could kind of maybe try to recreate this in your words and how your grandfather would then.
We would get there. I mean, so the music probably started around, I don't know, 7 or to 9 o'clock window, and then it would go till 1:30 when they closed. We would generally get there towards the like 9 o'clock hour, we would plan to meet up there together. And then I even recall that my dad was the bouncer at the door. So, he would let certain kids in, and they were my buddies, Um, and the music was pretty much centered around the blues. Even if it was in a jazz context, it was the blues, Blues can be very infectious. And that's what we were doing back then was we were into the blues more than more than anything. I'm sure everybody had their personal interests and excursions and their musicality and stuff like that. But it was all about the blues then. There was a guy who my grandfather had. He was a piano player. I don't. He was an older man. Probably he was. I would guess he was in his. He seemed old. He was probably in his 30s or something. But a piano player, and he played there regularly during that. I remember his name was Floyd. I can't remember his last name. Character, total character, and so for piano players and guitar players, they have to share the harmony, and so it's like they don't want to be fighting over the harmony. It's like, okay, you play, I'll play, you play, I'll play, kind of thing. Tommy had a way of staying out of the way of the harmony and being able to find his spots there where it's kind of like call and response kind of thing, rather than he's playing chords and piano players playing chords, and they might not be playing the same inversion, chord inversions and things like that clash. That's what I loved about Tommy, and I think that's what my grandfather heard in that the groove was there. It wasn't chaotic, um, and that was it. If the groove's there, it's not chaotic. People are enjoying themselves. Um, there's some excitement in the room. That's what he dug, and he would come out and want a little piece of that.
This whole imagery of you said it's a small room. It's not really a stage,
No,
but music's happening, and all of a sudden you're hearing the trumpet, and your granddad is already playing and comes out the door, and he's just. It sounds like New Orleans.
well, he was from New Orleans.
I look at this.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
So, and the Midwest had a really, because a lot of those guys that came up from the South, kind of like, and because of the packing plants and stuff like that in the Midwest, Chicago, and I mean all throughout the Midwest.
And Omaha too, right?
Yeah.
Chicago, Omaha, Sioux City.
Yes. Kansas City.
Yep.
Same thing. Those guys just stayed, and built a little niche for themselves there in the Midwest, kind of thing.
So your granddad, when was he in Count Basie's orchestra? Would that have been predating moving to Sioux City? Would that have been because he was in New Orleans? Is that how Count Basie would have known about him? I don't know if you ever heard the story, how that worked.
Well, so I've had to rely on articles. So I've Googled, my grandfather, and I've Googled Preston Love because they were buddies. And I found out more information about that from Preston Love. There's more press there about Preston, who talks about my grandfather and that period. So I believe that it was during the time that they were living in the Midwest, I believe, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, their generation was 30s on kind of thing. Uh,
Okay, so there you go, the Depression.
hmm,
And between everything in the South, then the Depression was just like, there are no jobs
yeah,
because of historical issues as well as just reality. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
when I guess a lot of the migration occurred of the African Americans
exactly,
coming up north.
exactly. Yeah, that Great Migration, and that's how a lot of people just came from the South to the North, and centered in the cities of Chicago and smaller towns up Sioux Falls, Sioux City, Omaha. Definitely Omaha. Can't um, kind of thing. Um,
So,
my grandfather, I remember when I was a kid that when he was still on the road and he had his own orchestra, and he would hook up. I remember him hooking up it was like a U-Haul thing with all the band's instruments, and they'd pile guys into cars and they'd hit the road throughout the Midwest doing gigs and stuff like that.
so how large by the time you were born and your dad, so your dad, was he born in Sioux City?
He was, yeah,
So how big did the African American the black population become in Sioux City?
1%, I believe, something like that. Very, very small, uh, mostly centered on the west side of Sioux City. Um, and still to this day, I still am getting stories about uh, things. There's association, um, Sioux City African American Heritage Museum or something like that, and they're starting to publish a lot of history from way back in the day. And Sioux City was an interesting place because there were people that came out of Sioux City that went on. There were writers and some musicians and some really interesting people that came out as black people that came out of Sioux City. Um, the thing in my lifetime in growing up, and so I left Sioux City when I was right out of high school, and couldn't wait to graduate and get out. And Tommy got out before I did, and I was like, yes, yeah, Tommy, and I couldn't wait to get out too.
And so
So
why was Russell couldn't wait to get out? What would you say were the driving forces for you? It, because of who you are.
yeah, I felt like I my growing up at the time that I grew up in the 50s, 60s. Um, there were some really good people in Sioux City, and then it was really racist too, kind of thing. The whole thing of the uh, civil rights movement that happened that I was really watching and reading and hearing about and wanting to be a part of. And in Sioux City, Iowa, there wasn't much going on at that time, and wanting to, make a difference. But Sioux City having a small African American community, and outside of our west side neighborhood area, you had your one doctor and you had your one barber and you had your one jazz club and you had your, that kind of thing. It was small. Our world was small. And I just couldn't wait to get out into the world and head to the big city.
So again, how many Anglo musicians wound up coming to the West Side, coming to the club, bothering not bothering, but being drawn to
Mm,
to the African American, the black part of town? How
mm,
many angles were on that list?
yeah. Well, there were more than I realized, and I would hear when I go back to Sioux City, like before pre-COVID times when the Bolin Festival and stuff like that, and I would talk to somebody that said, "I remember your grandfather's club. I used to go there. My dad used to go there. My whatever kind of thing." So there were people that um, white people that would come down there and frequent and that kind of thing. And uh, I mean, my grandfather, the way he was just very welcoming kind of guy. My dad, same way. Um, uh, you couldn't, you weren't uh, like you can't be here kind of thing. It's like yeah, come on in, have a drink, have a good time, kind of thing. They came for the music and the drink and maybe I don't know that have their experiences, with African American people, kind of thing. It was kind of a funny thing how people got together during the '60s and how they didn't, kind of thing in Sioux City.
So was Tommy's engagement pretty much just as a musician coming in and playing, or did he wind up having? Yeah, I mean, you guys were friends,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And Tommy was friends with other black musicians. I mean, that was that's how we got together. It's music brought us together. I remember Tommy Jerry Smith. You brought his name up, and his older brother was Harold Smith, and a couple of other black musicians our age. There weren't a lot of guys. I think you could almost count them on one hand. The black musicians that were playing that grew up there. There would be guys that would come through there, but the guys that grew up there, just a handful of guys, that could play, that could get any gigs. Number one, because there weren't a lot of gig opportunities for black musicians, kind of thing. And that's why I was fortunate that my grandfather happened to own a jazz club and happened to be supportive of me to be able to get some experience and play.
So would that have been the only black-owned venue or club?
As far as I know,
Because Johnny talked about that there were 50. Not that they all had live. I don't know if they all had live music or not, but that in the '60s, Sioux City just had a huge bar club scene
mm-hmm.
in general.
I don't know how many black owned businesses because I can't think of much
You
outside of two.
you would have known.
Yeah,
How could there's no way you wouldn't
yeah.
have.
And there was only one area that they could do business in. So,
So was it all redlined like that, where
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
you weren't going to be able to get a lease or get a loan or?
Yeah, I mean, it was the West Side.
Yeah, yep.
And it was, the West Side was mixed. Um, so our neighborhoods were mixed neighborhoods.
Was that where Tommy's family lived when they were in the small house? Was that the West Side? Johnny knows, but
Yeah.
I'm,
I
I'm
believe it was considered the North Side, but yeah, I'm not sure.
so so um also there's also a thread that we're working, which would have been, and I asked Johnny, he didn't have a recollection, like drug usage. Like, did Tommy take acid in Sioux City? Because Johnny talked about the hippie. There was a head shop, and there was a hippie scene, a little hippie that was
Yeah,
pretty vibrant, and that Tommy was also drawn
yeah,
to that.
Yeah.
And then there's marijuana, and there's cocaine, and
Yeah.
heroin.
Yeah.
And obviously, 14-year-olds aren't supposed to be doing that, and probably aren't. But but is there what can you share about the reality of what was going on that way?
All that was going on. I like all the hippies. It was kids that went away to school other places and came back, and that kind of thing. And they were really cool. And like the whole thing. Okay, so my grandfather's club and those people who were older and doing their thing. There was always drugs. There was always, of different varieties that you could probably get there, kind of thing. I remember one of my friends asking me, could I get him some weed? You know, I was in high school at the time. I didn't smoke weed in high school, and it was like because I knew there were all kinds of colorful characters that went to my grandfather's club, and you could go and get you a girl there, and that kind of thing. I even named one of my first bands after a prostitute who used to hang out at my grandfather's club, and her name was Pauline. So I named my band Jazzy Pauline in honor of Pauline because she was like a strong, fiery character, that so all those things were there in Sioux City. The thing is it had always been there since the 30s,
Yeah.
when it was legal, when marijuana and cocaine was legal, and then there were juke joints and stuff like that going on. My mind was blown. It was like our grandparents knew how to party, back in the day, um, kind of thing.
And you were going to the Catholic high school, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how strict did they try to be?
Oh, yeah. They tried to be as strict as possible without getting arrested.
Were there yardsticks and
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
rulers and
yeah. That was back in the day when if you did get and hit over the head with whatever, I got hung up in the closet by my jacket by a big old nun who was like probably from a farm somewhere. She's big and strong, 6 foot something. I don't know what I did, but hung me up in the cloakroom by my jacket and closed the door and walked out. Um, the thing is my dad his attitude was, well, what did you do to deserve it? Kind of thing. So you didn't get a break.
would that being hung in the closet be applied more to the black kids? Were white kids ever hung up in the closet?
I don't know, but there was some racist stuff. Yeah, and going to high school and going to school, and I went to pretty predominantly white schools.
Yeah, well,
So it was,
when I saw that you went to the Catholic school, I thought that has to be primarily white for sure.
yeah, yeah,
That you were getting a
uh,
better education, quote unquote.
yeah, yeah. My grandmother wanted us to go to Catholic school, and so what she said goes, and whether we wanted to or not, all of my friends on the west side all went to public school, went to Central, where Tommy went, which was much more mixed there. Not so much the high school that I went to. It was like in 60s, so I had some experiences, with racism and things like that. I was voted homecoming king in 68 in my high school, and it made some national magazines and stuff like that. I don't think I was the first, but I don't know, it was like newsworthy. But I had death threats, uh, kind of thing happening at that time. Um, there was racial tension between the public school, Central High School, and my high school, the Catholic high school, which were very close together, and most of the black kids went to Central, and there were maybe 5 black kids that went to Catholic school. So there was a little tension there, happened there, that happened to put me in the middle of it as to be the spokesman for something that I refused to do based upon look at what all we've done for you kind of thing. It's like
So you were asked to witness for the
I
high
was
school about the Catholic school was.
I was asked to be a mediator for talking to the community of black kids that were offended by some racial stuff that had happened during that time, and was asked by the superintendent of the school to be the mediator and kind of calm things down when it was a very offensive thing. I refused to do it, kind of thing. The Midwest, Iowa, there's like some of the best people that I know, and maybe being fortunate, I had lifelong friends there. Uh, we had, there's a lot of reservations around in and around Sioux City. I had Indian friends, white friends, and from different ethnic groups and stuff like that. Black friends, different kinds of friends, and the things that bring people together, and the things that separate people.
Well, fear's the big one, right?
Fear and ignorance.
Yeah, that there's a powerful combination.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, so
so with
it's
what
sad to go back and see Sioux City and to see how there are no black musicians that I see playing or in school playing or anything like that, and that's very sad.
so when the overall when Sioux City started shrinking and what all created the boom started
Yeah,
retracting over the decades, evidently a lot of the African Americans left
yeah,
because if there's not jobs, and I
yeah,
suppose if the amount of jobs drop down, they may be more likely to go to whoever will take this low paying job. If you're
exactly.
white, I guess you would get it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean,
So you mentioned that the jazz club represented reality, prostitution, drug usage, having a good time, not being constricted by the conservative kind of mores that get projected down onto society. Oh, you're supposed to be this way, you're supposed to be that way. That, in fact, your grandfather's club was a representation of a reality that totally
yeah,
existed everywhere
absolutely,
that wasn't in that box.
absolutely. I
So,
mean, couldn't avoid it. I mean, that was society, and all the different personalities and the characters. I mean, I that was my first job, was sweeping floors and washing dishes, and there at my grandfather's club. And I was really young, but definitely watching the adults, carry on, and you know,
watching the adults, you were in the
doing
middle of it,
some characters, kind of thing. Um,
and you
that
were and you were trusted because of it's your
yeah,
granddad's business, and this is all what's going on. So
yeah,
Russell was just Russell.
yeah. So it's definitely not did grow up sheltered in how people act, and I've seen many alcoholics and drug addicts, and the funny thing was Floyd, the piano player that I was talking about, that was much older than us, that we got a chance to play with him. was a heroin addict before I even knew what heroin was really. And the story is that he was doing an arpeggio, and he nodded out in the middle of his arpeggio and busted his head open on the end of the piano, and they had to take him to the hospital. So we got a chance to finish the night because Floyd was, off getting patched up. The story was as he told the doctors that he could get better drugs on the street than the ones that they gave him to fix him up for his pain.
So was Tommy there that night in terms of?
I believe he was. I believe he was.
So in other words, Floyd's heroin usage was not like a secret, was not hidden, wasn't,
No, it was well known.
and so Tommy would have known that as well.
Probably. Tommy's a pretty aware guy.
But I'm just trying. I'm just saying. I mean, if this was, and you said there was a couple times,
Yeah.
whatever, however many times where they
We
did
all
play
knew.
together.
We all knew. Yeah. We were all aware of the drug scene kind of thing back then.
And then obviously because of this nature of like your granddad's place, you're there, all these musicians are there, that whatever happened in there wouldn't have been viewed through a judgmental lens of that's wrong or that's bad. It just would have been viewed as, wow, look, this is happening here. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if that's that Tommy would have been exposed as you were to this kind of behavior, and that maybe there was a normalcy. Not that
Well,
it's normal, but it wasn't so
Yeah.
shocking, I guess, is the
it
question.
wasn't shocking. No. It was kind of my recollection of it was colorful. There were these characters that what made them characters kind of thing, and it was like in the instance of Floyd, he was a heroin addict, and he would get too loaded or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's Floyd being Floyd, kind of thing. But it wasn't like this shocking thing. My brother, I had a couple of nights that I would be able to play with my group of guys that I played with, and my brother was a saxophone player, and he was in my band, and I remember going to the gig. We didn't live very far from there. We walked to the gig. That he was too loaded to play. I don't know. He was drinking cough syrup or something like that. And we got on the bandstand, and he could not play. He couldn't hear his pitches.
Your brother?
Yeah, yeah, my middle brother. And I remember being like so mad at him. And he was my older brother. But it was my band, and I told him to hit the door because he just couldn't play. And so it was definitely my brother's couple of years, middle brother's 2-3 years older than I am. We were all aware of the whole drug scene and stuff like that. The hippie thing, there were hippies in Sioux City at the time. There were usually kids that went away to college and came back.
And acid didn't really hit the streets until
Oh, actually, it had.
it hadn't, or it had.
When we were in high school, yeah, it had. Yeah.
Was Tommy would have been there when acid hit Sioux City, or would he have been gone by then?
He's probably gone by then.
So you said you didn't smoke pot until after you graduated from high school. Do you have any sense of Tommy either drinking, smoking pot?
I have no recollection of that. None.
But he at least was part of a world where that was just
Along with it, kind of thing. I know when I came to Boulder to play in Energy, that now it was prevalent. All the drug dealers wanted to be around the scene and around Tommy, and so it was really prevalent. at that time. That was my major exposure to that scene. It was, the Klingons that, that have not so good intentions, and they just want to be around the scene, they wanted to be around Tommy, and a lot of those guys were, all the big drug dealers in town wanted to be around the scene. And how do they get into the scene were the drugs.
So, how about in Sioux City during this high school time, girls? You mentioned the prostitution in the club, but do you have any recollection of Tommy? Um,
No, I don't, because we weren't there for all of that. That was there, you know. And I would believe that there were maybe a couple of women who were prostitutes. No, it wasn't like a big thing. It was Pauline and maybe one other. And
so I don't know if so. Gee, you named a group after. I mean,
I
did you
named a
did
group after.
did you get some education from this person?
Yeah, I just would always see her, and she was always really nice to me. And her pimp was a character who was abusive and always, arguing with Pauline, and Pauline was so fiery that pimps are supposed to be able to control their women, and he could not control Pauline. And I thought, this woman is just like such a fiery person, individual. Um, and I came out of the club, and they were in the alley and they were fighting. And the only defense that he had for Pauline, because she could probably kick his butt, was, "You getting jazzy with me, Pauline?" Because he couldn't shut her up. And I thought, I'd heard that term, and I thought that was so great that I named my band after Jazzy Pauline.
So again, this would have been some night when you were there. Either were you working or maybe playing, where you would witness something like this
I
outside.
was either, if I wasn't playing, then I was there to hear the music.
So is it possible you were with Tommy and he might have witnessed something like that as well? Or were you guys hanging close enough to where there might have been some occurrence that
Yeah,
was witnessed?
yeah. We never went there alone. Like, if Tommy were to come down to there, it was either with the group. It was with John Bartle and or George Larvick. Kind of like it was two or three, four guys that would come together. Kind of thing. Um,
And how would they get there?
Good question. I don't know. Maybe
Would would
somebody's
rich would
car.
rich would parents be
Some
taking
parents
them?
did. Some parents did. Yeah. That my that knew my grandfather, and because he was a great guy, that they trusted him, trusted that he would keep keep us all safe. He had a big old police special underneath the bar. That was his peacekeeper, and he had a couple of really good big bouncers, that worked there. So he never wanted to have any trouble there because it was bad for business. And so
I wonder if there was another club in Sioux City where Tommy may have played more often within a jamming, hanging out situation versus your grandfather's place.
I'm sure, yeah,
That
I'm
there were.
sure, yeah,
And Bartle would know that. Did you? So you must have played out too in some other places, or not?
I did. I mean, John Bartle and I, we were pretty much started out together in the band context from the garage, and started doing gigs, and we did gigs on for many years in different situations and stuff like that. Uh, and John and Tommy were also very close. Um, there was, quite a few rock clubs that we used to play, and John Bartle kind of brought me into the whole rock scene, kind of thing.
So, is there any way to try to estimate an amount of times that you and Tommy might have jammed or played at your grandfather's club?
There was a period of time, not that long, maybe a couple of years or so, when that was the spot that we would all go to go play, to go hear music, kind of thing.
Would that be weekly? Um,
It
I mean,
was on every weekend, kind of thing, where it was for a period of time, stop in there, because there was a place you could go play and and then go somewhere else, kind of thing.
and you said that whoever was there, it was an all black audience.
Yes,
So I'm assuming then that that kind of club would always have some people in it. That
yes,
this was the heyday, well, later heyday of the lifestyle. Go hang out in clubs and drink
yes,
and
yes,
party.
yes,
And so Tommy then potentially guesstimating from what you said to maybe 7,500 times that over a couple of years potentially that was the destination
yes.
where this playing in front of a black audience would
Yeah.
have been just part of what was going on.
It was part of what was going on. As far as it's not. We talked about the music. Um, we never, that I can recall, it was like talked about race or anything like that. Those were my buddies. I remember doing gigs, and I had told this story to some guys, and they looked at me like, "Are you kidding me?" But it was like part of those times of I was playing with Bartle, and we would play these high school dances in these little towns in Nebraska and South Dakota and stuff like that, and getting escorted out of town by the police, um, being threatened because I was in the band and it was a black person in the band, and that was like just part of my story. That's what happened, growing up, just trying to play gig, in the Midwest. And my white friends that I told that story was like, "Do you remember?" And they would go, "No, we don't remember that. That's really messed up." It was like that's just what happened, kind of thing.
This I'm so I could uh, I I think most Anglos don't have a friggin' clue about what it's like to not be white and what that means.
Yep.
And
Unless you
so
travel to somewhere where you're
where you're
not.
the only white person,
No.
go to Africa or whatever.
Yeah.
So any other memories of music being played, created at your grandfather's club? Is there any other or composite of what you remember about?
Hmm.
Was Tom? Let me ask within this context, were you ever aware of Tommy bringing a musical idea in that wasn't a song that was already known? An original idea that he would be playing, or you get you guys to play with him?
Not that I recollect. It's not like it didn't happen, though. It's just that I don't remember. There's been so much music between then and now.
No, infinite. I'm sure. But just maybe it would have stood out. That's the only thing I'm thinking. This is the other thing I'm trying to make a connection. When did he first manifest creating something original? And Johnny didn't really remember. Bartle
Mhm.
probably might.
Bartle might. I know him, John and and Bolin were, very close. I mean, they were the two guitar players there in Sioux City. I often thought that John would, you know, have the success that Tommy enjoyed. It just didn't happen for John in the way that it happened for Tommy. Um, I
They
believe
still,
that their styles were similar in a certain way, and I think that it was because they shared a common background, in the blues, and you know, I mean, maybe it's because I grew up with those guys, and I don't think so. I believe that I'm pretty objective about musicians and their sounds and their styles and things like that. But I think, well, it's proven that Tommy is a very unique guitarist, and he became um, like there's all these other guitarists that kind of spawned out of that Spectrum album, and I could name, all those guys, and they're all excellent, successful guitar players.
let's
Tommy did it for them,
let's
The old,
stop let's stop right there for a moment. I want to see. I'd like to keep going, but I wanted to see if you'd like to take maybe a 5 minute break. I know I'd like to go pee.
okay,
And if you're into continuing, I think now we can transition into, once Tommy left Sioux City and your engagement with
that's a
him.
good idea. That's a good idea, Michael.
So I think, yeah, because I think I feel good about how I'm like a gold miner here. And I'm trying to, you know, mine for the gold. And I think I've done a pretty good job of helping you come up with stories that are and facts that are relevant to this new narrative that
Yeah,
just popped out of the sky. And I think that maybe 7,500 times playing in the club, I can see that as a real core piece of how this would wind, assuming we get it to happen.
sure.
And I just think right now the whole, Hollywood is so much more aware of the systemic racism and how everything's been represented in such a, distorted way for so long, that to come up with a story about Tommy that then shows this reality,
Yeah.
I think it really
Well,
is a positive thing.
I would like to talk more about that because I think that that's what made Tommy unique amongst a lot of guys. Uh, and I'd like to talk about that. I have talked about that with other musicians. If that's what made Tommy different for me personally, kind of thing. So I could use a break though.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, I'm gonna go.
5 minutes or so, whenever. I'm gonna
Okay,
go ahead and pause this here.
okay.
Paused. Recording restarted. I my career, I did a lot of big concert shoots and worked with a lot of big people, and it all really began for me because I had met Tommy in Boulder, and he had blown my mind, and it just pulled me more into music. And in my doing all the shoots I did, I was always cognizant that Tommy died before shooting artists live had become common, and that anything where he was shot, like the Deep Purple and the James Gang on Don Kirshner's rock concert,
Mhm.
it was horrible. There
Mhm.
was no accuracy, there was no featuring of him, and I was always so appalled by all that I made a personal pledge. Whenever I shoot a guitar player, I'm gonna make sure I shoot the hell out of the guitar playing.
Yeah,
And it was all because of Tommy and my love for him. So he had everything to do. And so then I got to shoot a lot of people, but I got to shoot. I got the Allman Brothers when Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks. I got to shoot Willie Nelson at Billy Bob's, which is the honky tonk in Fort Worth.
Mhm.
And of course, Trigger, his Martin with the hole in it. And Willie is such a great lead guitar player. And that's never what gets talked about, for musical people, they know,
Sure.
but it's never what gets talked about. And so I did that shoot and I followed through on my pledge. And 3 years later, I got to do another shoot in Hawaii at Jack Johnson, the rock singer songwriter guy who lives in Oahu,
Mhm.
did a festival every year to support environmental awareness. And he would pull all, national acts, but then the best of the acts that lived in Hawaii. Willie has a jam band that only plays in Hawaii. And he plays a turquoise Telecaster.
Mhm.
But anyway, point is, I got to go backstage and say hi. And he went, I really like that DVD you did. It's because I shot the guitar well. And so I did and I could root that all back to Tommy, in
Yep.
terms of just my own inspiration.
Yep.
And so to have you be working with you here right now within this is an opportunity that we're now creating, our team, and that I get to do this right now, and that I get to do this with you, and we're talking about what we're talking about is deeply thrilling to me, Russell. And I just want you to know that this is personal for me, and I'm like figured out how to get it to this point, and it may just actually, I don't know, we'll see. But David really does know the people David really knows.
Yep.
And Karen, they're ready to go. She's turned her back on this completely. And now she's going through all the memorabilia. They're stepping into it. And David had wanted her to do this. And now we've got a vehicle to write an entirely new Tommy Bolin story that we will then be able to show to the writer director once we get somebody teed up. And I think what we're creating here in this story, and with your contribution, it just changes everything in a dramatic way. In terms of, can you get people interested?
Yep.
Can you get people excited? Can you get it to happen? One of the most difficult things in the world would be to do what we're trying to do without us already being successful movie
Sure.
producers. But with Johnny and Karen and then Dave, but the key is building the manuscript to just be friggin' amazing. And this whole piece that you're filling in the blanks for, I think is just massively important. So thank you, Russell, for.
Well, thanks for asking me.
So let's start with that before we get into the specifics of Boulder and New York or whatever. Just what is Russell's opinion of how could Tommy meet a Billy Cobham, create a new band with Narada, Norma Jean, and Reggie McBride when it's his first shot at putting a band together and 3 out of the 5 members are African Americans? How is it that Tommy, what's your take on how Tommy became that Tommy?
Yeah. I think Tommy was always that person, that kind of person. He was different in that way. He was different at the time in that way in the 60s and the 70s. As far as the people that he played with, he just wanted to play with good players. That's evident, and the people that he's played with, the people that he's recorded with, kind of thing. That started early on. It was never a barrier. He wasn't. He was a rock and roll star who, in the rock and roll business, and the way that music has been categorized throughout time, and how they market to certain groups of people. Um, that is the science of music. I remember when there wasn't a science of music, but that I was aware of. And I'm speaking of like being in San Francisco and going to the Family Dog and Bill Graham's places, and you could see Small Faces and The Who and Arlo Guthrie and then Keith Jarrett and Miles Davis and Charles Lloyd all in the same bill. So you went for The Who and you came away with Charles Lloyd and Miles Davis, and then you got exposed to something that you didn't go there for, but that it was like, wow, you know. And that was really cool. That's what I really liked about those times that are kind of missing now. Tommy, early on, it didn't, it wasn't, what it connected to how music is marketed. So R&B is like predominantly black music. Rock and roll has become predominantly white music. No, it doesn't mean like uh, it's it was hard at one point in time for there to be um, a mixed band kind of thing because people worried about can we get gigs that people aren't going to accept that, you know, kind of thing. Um, so there was that thinking amongst those people who were promoting an act or something like that. I've been told that it's like, well, you know, what are we going to do with the black guy in the band, you know, kind of thing, you know, in a rock and roll thing. Tommy was not like that. He was very special in that way that I recognized early on, and he offered me an opportunity to come and play in his band. And he was very generous with me, and uh, and then to see how it was more about if there was he had a vibe with you, and most importantly, can you play, kind of thing. That I think that was afforded to him too, uh, and he just was that way. I think he was totally unique in that way, that he shared his music and he shared his musical experience, and he liked you. If he liked you, he liked you, you know, kind of thing. And you're, you know, come on in, you know, and hang, whatever. Um, I know a lot of it's what people don't know or don't recognize or don't even see about Tommy, which what made Tommy different. And they recognized that Tommy was different. You know, he was different in his music. He was different in his style and the way he dressed. He'd wear big pimp hats, and I remember when he started wearing pimp hats because that's what the old blues guys wore, those big pimp hats. And Tommy made that part of his style. And I used to laugh because I was like, Tommy, that's a pimp hat, you know. And but that's was part of his expression, whatever he was trying to say, fashion wise or what have you, kind of thing. And it came from the blues, you know, and how those guys dressed and that kind of thing. And he just mixed it up in his own personal style. Um, he and the way he treated me and brought me in. I mean, I was not so much looking to play rock and roll, and you know, I was more into jazz. And he said, "Hey, man, why don't you come to Boulder and you know play with me?" You know, and it was and I was like, Tommy, I don't know anybody in Boulder, man. What would I do in Boulder? You know, and he would always say, "Don't worry about it." And uh, so I picked up and moved to Boulder. So
Was that in 72? Because he
That was
left Zephyr at the end of 71.
it was between the time when there was a period of time when Bergie wasn't his drummer for that period of time, and that's when I came in and did some gigs with him, recorded that one Live at Ebbets Field record with him, and that was both me and Bobby at the time. But Tommy and Kieran were the only people that I knew, and Stanley because we rehearsed, you know. But I'd go over to their apartment there. I believe it was off of Table of Mesa or something like that. We'd sit in his music room and just talk, listen to music, mostly listening to music and sharing ideas and stuff like that. It's like, hey, Tony, this is what I'm into. Listen to this, you know. And you know how you want to share something that you really like with someone and they're not really paying attention because I'm not really into that, you know, kind of thing. But he would sit and he would hunch over and he would just listen, you know, whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, if it was something he didn't like, he would tell you that he didn't like it, you know. But he was totally open. That's when I really got to know Tommy because it was just sort of him and I, and he was a friend, you know, that he brought me there to Boulder, and being that he was the only one that I knew, and Karen spent a lot of time with those two on a personal level, as well as it was all about the music too. His, I don't think that a lot of people in the whole rock scene, it's like this. How do I say? A white dominated genre, and he broke that mold. People that want to be like Tommy, or want to do something similar to what Tommy did. Number one, in their style is it's like the element that's missing is the blues that Tommy had, and just the way the scales that he played blues scales more than just rock scales. I mean, you listen to what every guitarist that I've ever heard of that heard that Spectrum album, they were just completely floored. It was like, who is that? You know, who's that guy? And that is totally burning, you know. Jazz guys, was like, that is a totally burning solo. And his sound, he could play one note and it was like so meaningful, you know, kind of thing. It came from the blues. And I think, as far as, in my estimation, a lot of rock players that noodle, play a lot of noodling notes that don't really mean anything, they're just a bunch of notes. The feeling of playing one note that Tommy could do, that he could just say that, and that said everything, you know. And he could also riff, kind of thing, but he wasn't just a riff guitar player. He could play some meaningful, lyrical solos, and I think that's what jazz players like out of Tommy being considered a rock player, kind of thing. We all wonder, what would he be doing now, you know, what would he be playing now, kind of thing, because he was an explorer. He explored a lot of different stuff. He was into reggae, he was into some jazz, he was definitely into the blues, he was the rock stylings, uh, yeah, I just could only imagine what he would be into now, and also having the years behind it now, he would probably today have been playing upwards of 50 years, you know, and all that experience, and what he'd be doing right now, it'd be incredible, I'm sure.
So let's In terms of when you moved to Boulder, and as you said, you were hanging out with Tommy and Karen a lot on a personal level. What at that point, Tommy had obviously become who Tommy was becoming. He was
Mhm.
maturing, and with his full personality, his full being would have been manifesting in his personality. What's a way to talk about Tommy in terms of his personality in Boulder at that time when you came and hung out with he and Karen a bunch?
Um, so I didn't. Tommy offered. He's like when he left Boulder, when he was leaving for LA, he wanted me to go with him. And it's like, hey man, let's go to LA. We'll get a place and do some stuff. I wasn't able to go, and so and that's when Tommy started with Deep Purple, playing with Deep Purple and that kind of thing.
So what
So
what
one of
was
those
it?
things,
Why couldn't you go, or why wouldn't you go? What happened there?
I got busted in Colorado, and so I couldn't leave the state.
So were you? What were? How did you get busted? What were you doing?
Oh, I was doing these gigs in Colorado. We were playing like a lot of these ski resorts. I met this guy, turned out to be a narc who befriended me, and it was over like a less than a half a gram of coke that I didn't even sell to him. It was like I got for him so he could take his trip, so he says. And so then a year later, I'm at a gig, and two DEA agents show up and arrest me for that, which got thrown out of court. But I had to go through the process of not being able to leave Colorado at that time, and kind of thing. That's why I didn't go.
So who were you playing with?
I was playing with different bands. I mean, I've always been a freelancer,
Yep.
but I played in a band with these guys from Little Rock, Arkansas. We were doing a lot of dates, but then I had my own band then, and then I was freelancing uh, between Denver and Boulder quite a bit with different people, kind of thing.
Who was?
I,
What was the name of your band?
Blue Plate Special
And
was the
who?
name of
And you
my
remember?
band.
And you remember who was in it? I mean, you
They
must.
were all Sioux City guys, mostly Sioux City guys. Uh, John Bartle for a little bit, and a guitarist named Roger Rothwell. You might have heard his name in Sioux City, maybe not. And Gerald Evans and Mark Engel and Archie Shelby, who played on that live at Ebbsfield record, percussionist. So, and I had that band going during the time that I was playing with Tommy too.
So let's talk about Archie a little bit. Who was Archie?
Archie was my childhood friend that I grew up with, and he lived around the corner from me. And uh, we were just thick as thieves. We like hung out a lot, from when we were kids to. And I brought Archie into Tommy and introduced Tommy to Archie and Archie to Tommy, and Archie's like being Arch. Archie was a great guy. Tommy just loved him. Johnny loved Archie. Everybody loved Archie. He was a total character. Um,
Was he a percussionist?
he was a percussionist, yeah,
Back in
and
the glory days of conga playing.
yeah,
Every band had to have a conga player.
Yeah.
Or
Tommy used to call Archie, introduce Archie as I've got bongos on my brain. Archie, I've got bongos on my brain, Shelby.
yep, yep. That's on that Ebbets recording.
Yeah.
And so he moved out here. When did Tommy ever play with you and Archie in Sioux City back in the day? Was Archie coming down and hanging?
Uh, it's possible. Archie kind of plugged in a little later. He was a couple of years younger, and I don't think he was really playing at that time. He was mostly singing and then picked up percussion or congas, later on kind of thing.
Because that Ebbets Field show is Ebbets 74. It was done in
Yeah.
74. And
Yeah.
he had, that was after he had already been in the James Gang
Yeah.
and after he had done Spectrum. So,
Yes.
does that mean you moved to Boulder in 73, 74?
Yeah. No, 73.
Because then Energy would have been broken up by then. Because
Yeah.
that's what
It
they
was,
petered out in late 72, early
yeah.
73. And then he did Spectrum and he joined the
Yeah.
James. Joe
Yeah.
Walsh got him the gig in the James Gang.
Yeah. But he was still doing gigs, energy gigs, during that time, although energy had disbanded. Um, when I came to Boulder, when he asked me to come to Boulder to play with him, it was still was playing his energy, and we used to play the Good Earth very frequently, and some other dates around that time, we play Ebbets Field too, which culminated in them recording that evening.
So Bobby had obviously he got Robbie Chamberlain out. He wanted Bobby to replace Robbie and Zephyr.
Yeah,
Then he quit Zephyr and Bobby quit to go with Tommy, and then they
yeah,
formed the original Energy.
yeah.
And again, they had about a 12-month or so life. And so when he got James Gang was either over or in between gigs or whatever tours that he then didn't just have Bobby come back in. He placed the call to you
Yeah.
for you to come out. So did he ever say what he was thinking in terms of why did he call Russell?
I don't know. I was like something one evening sitting around in when we were in New York. He just said, "Hey man, why don't you come to Boulder and play in my band?" And and I knew Bobby not as well as I know him now, but I knew of Bobby back then. It was like, well, yeah. Well, what about Bobby? I don't know what happened during that period of time.
So New York again. We were talked about that earlier, but do you have a sense of what year it is? Again, I'm asking again. I think that you moved to New York.
71, possibly 70, 71.
And again, that was why. Why did you move to New York?
Um, get out of Sioux City.
And I guess New York is kind of known for jazz.
Absolutely. And I had the notion that I wanted to go there and study, and that was I got to New York hearing all this stories about 52nd Street and stuff like that, and I got there too late. But there was still I was able to go to all those jazz spots, the Village and the Gate and the Slugs, and I'd go see Thad Jones and Mel Lewis at Slugs every Monday night, and I'd go up to Harlem and go see Art Blakey at Smalls every week, and saw some great players, and that was during the time that he had Freddie Hubbard playing with him, Freddie hired me. I lived in Denver, in Boulder. Freddie came to Boulder, and he was playing at the Blue Note, I believe, and my roommate at the time met him, and I was on a gig, and called me and said, "Don't hang out, just come home." And I was like, "Well, what's going on?" "Don't ask, just come home." So I get home, and there's Freddie sitting there in the living room. So we hung out, and then I invited him to my gig the next night, and he said, "Yeah, so I'll pick you up." Picked him up. He came, sat in with the band all night, and then offered me a gig, and that's how I ended up moving to Los Angeles.
So how long did you play with Freddie?
Not very long, because Freddie was on his downward spiral there. If he showed up at all for a gig, or he didn't piss off the club owner, um, we played, I don't know, a few months of gigs there.
So was it drugs?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Was he a heroin addict?
Cocaine.
Cocaine, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that I remember seeing it was what 1971, whatever, and I can't find it on a itinerary. But Miles Davis played at the old Auditorium Theater in Denver, and I've looked and looked. It doesn't show up on an itinerary,
Mhm.
and that's when he had Jack DeJohnette, Airto, Gary Bartz,
Mhm.
and on electric piano, Keith Jarrett.
Mhm.
I think the only tour Keith Jarrett ever did playing electric piano.
Yeah.
And I had never seen anything like that. And it was because of Tommy and being in Boulder where I would have been inspired to want to go see that. And Miles was on stage maybe 10% of the time.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think in retrospect, we know what that means. I mean,
Sure.
backs. And then when he came out, he would have his back to the audience the whole
Right.
time. And
Funny
oh,
story.
okay, Keith, go. And
Yeah.
it's like no
Funny
drop
story.
off.
Funny story about that band was Gary Bartz would complain to Miles about Keith Jarrett playing too much while Gary was soloing, and could Miles say something to Keith, and Miles said, "I'll talk to Keith." So he goes to Keith and goes, "Gary loves the way you play, man. He wants you to play more."
So Miles was the ultimate motherfucker in some
Yeah.
way. In some ways,
Yeah.
in terms of so what was your connection within that whole? Who did you wind up playing? So anyway, you went to L.A. right to play with Freddie, and then that ended, and then what happened to you then?
So I, started playing in the studio. So I hooked up with a group of guys. Actually, started with the band. We had a band called Radar, and it was Michael Ruff and David Schwartz. It was a trio, and we played all original music. And we were kind of a thing in LA at that time. It's fusion group. Um, uh, what was that? We started this club where I forget. It was on Sunset Boulevard there. Uh, it's where that guy died, who was like some grunge band or something like that. It became known for. Anyways, it was like a spot in L.A. at the time, early '80s, and so all the songwriters from all the different publishing companies hired us as their rhythm section to do all of their publishing demos and stuff like that. So we did a lot of studio work, and then freelancing uh, in LA, and really that's where I got immersed um, in the black music scene. There, I became a part of that. It was the Leimert Park scene. Was Billy Higgins, jazz drummer, started a performance place called World Stage that's still happening. Billy's no longer with us, and we did a lot of concerts and a lot of music in schools, jazz education in schools, and it was a great scene. It was and got accepted actually. And Carol Kay, when I first moved to LA, I met her in Denver. She came there with a drummer. Spider Webb was the guy's name, and she gave me her card, and she said, "You ever get to LA, give me a call." So I did, and she took me around to all the studios and introduced me to all of her friends
Wow.
who were Plaz Johnson, who Plaz hired me to play in his band, and I played in Carol's band, and Roland Batiste and Jimmy Smith, and these were like, and Joe Picaro, who was at the Percussion Institute at the time. These were all her buddies, and that she just introduced me to, and got me a kickstart in LA.
Wow. Do you still in touch with her?
I see her on Facebook every now and then. Well, I kind of, because she's like a rabid Trump person.
Oh, she is?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I'm just going to leave you alone for the period of time, Carol.
Okay, too
We'll
bad.
talk. We'll talk. Yeah.
I wonder if Hal Blaine was too. I know he just
No
died last
idea.
year.
Yeah. I was surprised, I was totally surprised because I hung out with Carol a lot.
Wow.
She's a hoot. And
And
I,
obviously had none of the racial things that Trump is so
no,
famous for.
no, no.
Unbelievable. That's a surprise.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole good vibration. She was the bass player on Good Vibrations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wrecking Crew.
yeah, I mean, and Leon. Well, Leon would have been. He was already done with that scene then.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm trying to get the timing here. So this was in 73 or 74 or
So that goes back to New York. That was 70, 71 period of time. Ended up in Boulder. So, uh, like 73, kind of, yeah, in that area. Because I'd been playing with Tommy for at least a year off and on, before we did that Ebbets Field date that was recorded. And that was 74.
yeah, this is a completely a chapter that again I'm remiss in. I had no idea that, and I don't know where I was not seeing. I mean, I guess it was easy to go when it was at Tulagi. Do you
Yeah.
remember playing with Tommy at
We played
Tulagi?
there. We played Tulagi. I don't know if you remember the Walrus.
Oh yeah,
We played
absolutely.
there every week. We were at Good Earth, like really frequent.
Well, the Good Earth wasn't that. When did that really get going? Was that 72 or 3? 73, I think, is when it became. Because
Yeah,
Freddie Henchy would play there a
yeah,
lot, right?
yeah,
And then that was quite the cocaine scene,
yeah.
which
My
I
first gig with Tommy was he paid me in cocaine. It was like about, I don't know, $500 worth of cocaine. It was like, Tommy, what am I going to do with this, man? I need to get some money. I
sell it.
said, that's exactly what he said.
Yep.
It didn't get sold.
And it didn't sit around, I guess, either.
No, I was like, Tommy, oh, no, you need to pay me, some bread, don't, I can't, because I just did it all, it was like, and he
So
laughed. And so,
whoever owned the Good Earth, they must have been cocaine dealers.
yeah, it's
I,
very possible.
I wound up picking up, because I was doing this Uber Black business for quite a while, 3 years, where I'd pick up people that had money. And I picked a guy up at the airport who lived up in outside, where was it? Up in the mountains. And he had been in Boulder then, and he knew the owners of the Good Earth, and he
Mm,
was tied back into that whole scene, and that was all, and that's what he taught, just all the drugs and how
yeah,
insane it was,
yeah, it was totally insane.
and he wound up owning a bar up in the mountains for decades or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but all tied back into how that all
Sure.
got started out of the drug scene in Boulder.
Yep.
I thought that was kind of
Yeah, it was raging back then. And some of those guys that didn't go to jail, they're all legitimate now, you know,
so.
and made a bunch of money.
So who was in Energy then? Who would play these shows?
Well, Stanley, I remember some of those Good Earth dates. Keyboard player who had, was it Tommy? Tom?
Stevenson,
Tom Stevenson or the other guy?
Rocky.
Rocky Grace.
Was it Rocky?
Yeah, I believe so.
Because
Four piece.
Rocky was in Barnstorm for a period there. Well, he
Yeah,
and Stevenson were both in Barnstorm at the same time.
yeah. I almost made the mistake of saying Tommy Stevenson, which he wanted to call himself. And of course, Tommy said, "There's only one Tommy in this band." So,
So it had to be Tom. So who was singing?
Jeff Cook sang. Actually, yeah, it was Jeff Cook. Now we did do some gigs without Jeff, where it was more like jam stuff. You know, we just Tommy would come up with tunes to play on the spur of the moment, and me and Stan, okay, all right, and so there was a set.
Kind of like Ebbets 74,
Yeah,
which when I had met Bob Furbrosh back in the early 70s, and he wound up working for Faye during the period when Tommy died. And he was a first-hand witness. He was the guy who turned me on to the idea that Barry murdered him. And he had the circumstantial evidence piled up to the ceiling. So when Tommy died, and Bob was working there, he was the runner, the gopher. His name was Bob the Dayman. When Tommy died, he went to Faye's closet and took all the tapes. And that's how we started the archives.
beautiful story. I love it.
And Bob, you know, because who owned that stuff? The estate of Tommy Bolin owned it, and Johnny was, obviously our partner. And he did what? Well, Barry didn't own it, and so why did I bring that up? That's because Ebbets 74, of course,
Yeah.
was one of the crown jewels. And I remember Bob when we first, I don't even know if the CD was out yet. And Bob had, before we started the archives, he had the Fever box set. There was all these bootlegs. Johnny didn't make a penny. It was a disaster. And Bob had made up a fake Japanese. He had started getting into audio recording, and he had a early PC-based Pro Tools type system. And he became quite the master also. And he put a fake Japanese bootleg together with Jap symbols on it.
Yep.
And he gave me a copy, and my jaw hit the fucking ground. I go, how do we make this legal? And that's how the archive started. I didn't know Johnny, but I got a hold of him, and that's how we started. But anyway, I remember it was either the tape or maybe when we first put the CD together. And San Francisco River. And I was driving to the airport to pick up my mother, Stapleton Airport. She was coming back in town. And I drove right past the exit because I was playing that in the car, and just so amazing. That was such a great.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I digress rather.
Those songs spawned out of Tommy and I sitting in his music room listening to music. And I suggested, San Francisco River, and a song by Leon Thomas called Honey Man. And he ended up adding it into the set list. He loved Honey Man, which was a song that I did in my little group that I had on the side going, and I sang on that, and not very well. I kind of was like, oh God, trying to sing and play drums at the same time kind of thing. But I wanted to So Philip Palomini, because you were talking about the archives, and I did a tribute record, Tommy Bolin tribute record CD that I recorded. Actually, it was the first thing that I'd recorded as a band leader. And Philip Palomini, when he was alive, he called me and he said, "How did you um, how did you get the rights to record that music, and record those tunes and stuff like that?" And I said, "Well, I got the mechanical rights, kind of thing." And also, I contacted you back then. I contacted Jeff Cook, and got everybody's permission. Philip told me because when he lived in Hollywood there off of Sunset, he said, "Man, you won't believe I had recorded all those jam sessions and all this music that Tommy was doing with," and he's just naming off the who's who. And he goes, "How do I get this? How do I get this out? Kind of thing." I don't know if he ever talked to you about that
When was this? In the past five,
before he
6 or 7 years?
died. Yeah.
Yeah, because they did put it together. This was
Oh,
after the
good.
archives had ended.
Okay.
Because Hampton, I mean, we still owned the masters and wound up still distributing them, but Greg Hampton had um, tried to assassinate me because he had his visions and he was able to find the teaser tapes, which was obviously a huge, I don't know how that all happened. But he wound up not having Tommy's best interests or Johnny's
Yeah.
at heart. And so Philip got it together and got that CD put together, and Hampton went apeshit to block it. And because Johnny had signed a document that gave Greg control, Johnny signed stuff that is just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Greg got those right, and he was now the master of the Tommy Bolin everything. And for him to then want to do cease and desist with Philip was about as wrong as anything could be. And Johnny wound up getting a hold of him and saying, "What the fuck are you doing?" You know, because that just showed you how soulless Greg Hampton
Yeah. Yeah.
was. Because how could you not appreciate Phillips, good, bad, or whatever the hell, drug dealer, but still, he was, and Tommy was into it. And
Yeah.
Philip and he were as tight as can be. And
Yeah.
drugs obviously played a big part of that, but they had been
Yeah.
tight before it got crazy.
Yeah. From when they were kids.
And so to do Glenn Hall, all that stuff. So anyway, that was
Yeah.
yeah. So some of this stuff. Anyway, so then 74, you wound up doing Ebbett's that that night, Tommy Bolin and Friends. And Tommy, it was right about then, wasn't it, that Tommy moved to LA?
Yeah. Right after that. Yep.
Yep.
Uh, you know, so I didn't talk. Well, actually, the intermittent when Tommy would come through Colorado, there was one night he had been with Deep Purple. Now he was a solo artist, and Johnny and I went to see him at Evans Field.
Well, I was there too. That was
He was with the band with Marta on drums, and
May 21st,
yeah,
1976. Their third or fourth official gig ever.
yeah. We went back to talk to Tommy, and he didn't even recognize us. He didn't know who we were, and I was just like my mouth was open, Um, I was shocked and really afraid for him at that time. When after Tommy died, that was the end of rock and roll for me. I was so soured on rock and roll. that I went completely a different way.
Yeah, because I was working in the record store business in Boulder, had been for years. And so I got invited that day. They were going to do a meet and greet at like 5 in the afternoon, not at Ebbitt's, but at that warehouse, which was at Leetsdale and Alameda.
Mhm.
And there wasn't enough room in Ebbitt's to hold a meet and greet. So it was a whole function from uh, Atlantic and Emperor Records, and meet and greet with Tommy. And I hadn't seen him in years. And of course, all the rumors had gone wild. So I went. It's 5 in the afternoon. He comes in, and I'm going, and he totally recognized me, gave me this huge bear hug. And I was like, wow, so relieved. And then 45 minutes, whatever it was, he went on talking to other people. Time to leave. And in the lobby was a payphone. And Tommy was there with two other guys who were on the phone. I knew what that meant. And you experienced him hours later where he didn't recognize you. So
Yeah,
that phone call that I saw was how he then got so loaded that night. Wow,
yeah,
that's an amazing bookend right there.
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and and so yeah, they got to the bottom line, and Karen was at the bottom line, and we haven't gotten to that point yet to talk. She mentioned it briefly, and that's when he got so loaded that he had to lean up against. He couldn't play, and that night, Nat Weiss dropped him from Emperor and Nara to quit. And that was all in the span of 4 weeks.
mm,
And you go back and look at that lineup, and it was one of the great new bands in the history
mhm,
of rock music at that time.
yeah,
And I really want to talk to Nard and Mark Stein, and just what were those rehearsals like? What those stories have never been told.
yeah,
They've never been talked about.
yeah, like that. I've heard Narda talk about, you know, his time playing with Tommy and how great the music was. I've heard him talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yep.
Haven't heard him talk about, and it's like when you really talk about the truth and stuff like that, and people don't want to talk about the truth, kind of
Well,
thing.
well, and in most interview situations that are going to be published somewhere, people want to be circumspect. They want to be, measured when it comes to some of this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's what we're trying to do here, where it's like, okay, we don't have to, we're not saying this is all going to be published tomorrow.
sure.
And the more salacious stuff we know we're not going to do anything with. We are going to try to create
Yeah,
some presence where we can show Hollywood what we're doing here.
yeah,
But we're very clear that we don't want to have you or have anybody admitting these things where the public could then hear
exactly.
that kind of thing. But for what we're trying to do here with the manuscript, I mean, we want to get down in there. So hopefully at Narada, I'll be able to get, because
Yeah,
he's pretty geared up right now with his podcast,
yeah,
and he's still happening, So,
yeah.
um, so anyway, that was. What did you think of the show, though? That just in terms of being there before you went back. Was it backstage after the show or before?
It was after the show.
And so, what did you think?
I was like, I didn't think Tommy sounded good that night. Um, he's obviously loaded, but I dug the band. Um, the energy was there.
Oh, with Narada and Reggie.
Yeah,
I think we got a rhythm section happening here.
yeah,
And I remember the thing I felt without having that was that Tommy didn't play enough. I wanted more leads.
yeah.
And Mark Stein was doing all these pieces, which were friggin' amazing. But I
Mhm.
didn't really want to hear that. I wanted to hear Tommy.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
Tommy, the way, because of the band arrangements, I can see where Tommy philosophically wanted it to be have a band
Yeah.
arrangement dynamic where it wasn't
Mhm.
just him, but that gave him the ability to kind of be loaded
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
potentially. Anyway,
Anyway, yeah.
so let's. I wanted to go back again when you talked about moving to Boulder and hanging out with Karen and Tommy a lot, and I'd asked you about just what was his personality like. How do you remember him when it comes to just the brighter, friendlier, kind of this loving spirit kind of guy?
Yeah.
Can you
Those are the
talk?
days
Can you
for me.
talk about his personality and just the way he was?
Those were the days for me. He seemed really happy. Uh, uh, he was fun. You know, he was a lot of fun. I remember when I first got to Boulder, it was like, I don't know. All Tommy said was, "Don't worry about it." Okay, I'm going on that. You know, young. Uh, he, I slept on this friend of his couch, Rosdorf, when I first got there, and then eventually was able to get my own place together. And Roz has got stories because Tommy lived upstairs from her at one point in time. Anyway,
Is
so
Roz? Is she still?
she's still in Boulder.
Okay, well, we're creating a path here.
Yeah. So she's got some stories, early stories, Tommy in Boulder, and Tommy lived upstairs from her in Boulder. I'm think off of Pearl Street or something like that. Anyway, I got my own place, uh, every day would go by Tommy's place and hang out with him and Karen, and uh, Karen would pop in and out, or we'd sit and talk for a while, and then we'd go back in the music room and uh, listen to music. He would either play something, play some stuff, or we were just listening to music, and we listened to a lot of music, kind of thing. Um, Talking about Sioux City and all the characters and stuff like that. And he was really light, a lot of fun. The gigs were fun. Um, he was uh, still developing his thing at that time, but he kind of had so he was developing his thing, meaning that when I first heard that Spectrum album, I knew he was gonna uh, put out some really great music because he was starting to write a lot. When I first heard the Spectrum album, I thought it was Tommy's album. And like I said, I was in Boulder, I was passing by a record store, and I heard this record, and I immediately knew it was Tommy.
Must have been the record center. This
And
is
there was
where I
lots of
worked.
music outside
Oh,
too.
yeah, maybe not, but I think Tommy at that point had captivated Boulder pretty well.
Pretty much. I mean, it was like a total scene then. I'd never experienced because everybody wanted to be in Tommy's orbit there in Boulder at that time, kind of thing, and uh, had a lot of fun. I remember Tommy get really high. I was like, God, Tommy, I can't, I can't play. I can't play being that high, so I can't get that high, you know. But I would. He's one of the few guys I played with that uh, could play really high and play great really high. And there's a few guys I played with, Billy Preston and another guy who could get really high, and still it was like, damn, that's Billy Preston, you know. Freddie Hubbard was another guy. It was just a guy who could consume a lot of alcohol and drugs and still play, you know.
So here you had this unique perspective of having played with Tommy at 12, 13 years old in Sioux City
Yeah.
And then you sit down and listen to the Spectrum album for the first time. And his presence was so powerful, you just thought, well, this is Tommy's album.
Yeah, I was
But
like, that's what I expected out of Tommy. It's like, well, shit, yeah.
was it surprising, or did you know him so well from having those formative years where it made sense to you?
Uh, what we were doing, and it was pretty kind of jam band stuff with the in between energy group. When Tommy had me come out and play, and we were doing a lot of fusion stuff, and so he was really playing a lot of guitar, playing a lot of musical ideas and stuff like that. So they were nice when it was just like, damn, Tommy, that's burning. And so I pretty much expected that out of Tommy to the point where it was like, I thought that was his record until it was like, oh no, that's Billy Cobham's record. It was like, that's, that's still some great shit. Um, I was the best, some of his best work was uh, that record. And there's a few players who can, because I'm sure Billy Cobham gave him X amount of bars to solo in. You're not going to have endless bars to solo. You got to say what you got to say in 4 bars, 8 bars, maybe 16. I think he said it all in about 8 bars, and that's the mark of a great soloist, that you can play a meaningful solo rather than having to take chorus after chorus after chorus to try to get to something, kind of thing.
Have you seen those videos that Leland Sklar's done this year?
No, I haven't.
So earlier in the year when the pandemic first started, and it was a thing on Facebook about 10 days to post 10 different albums that really had an impact on you. And so, of course, I did it, and I had Spectrum. And I'm Facebook friends with Leland, but we don't know each other really. So I did that post and I tagged him. And of course, on Facebook, you can see that somebody tagged you. And that afternoon, he recorded, because I don't know if you've noticed, but he's doing this amazing, where he then plays bass along with tracks he played on originally.
Hmm.
And that day I tagged him. He did Stratus. And he tells his story about it. And then he wound up doing all the songs he played on Spectrum. And I would do that again to him, and then he would do it again. So I really think I was the instigator of that. And but and he had first played. He was in a group called Wolfgang in the
Hmm.
late '60s that Bill Graham managed. That never made it,
Hmm.
but they got on the festival circuit, and they played some festival with Zephyr, and that's when Leland had met Tommy and was blown away. And so when he walked in the studio at Electric Lady, he didn't know Tommy was the guitar player. He just Billy's come on, and so his story, it's really pretty amazing. It's another good one. But what you were mentioning earlier about Tommy back in the day in the club, your grandfather's club, because I did this long bike ride about 4 months ago, and I just listened to Spectrum like fresh on Bluetooth as I'm riding my bike. And Jan Hammer would be, doing an amazing solo, and I really honed in on how Tommy was making up colorizations to play underneath the solo.
Hmm.
And something you said earlier about what's his name, the keyboard player who was the heroin addict. You had
And the
mentioned
question of Floyd.
that whole the thing about Tommy learning how to when you were
Oh
telling that
yeah,
story, and I thought, hell, I remember when I was listening to Spectrum that whole thing of how he could support what was happening without soloing,
yeah, yep,
and that really stands out on Spectrum, I think.
yeah. And Tommy played drums in the early years, so he had a good he had a great rhythmic sense too, which made his comping and his picking was so rhythmic. And I'm sure I can attribute that to him having been a drummer at an early age. So his comping style, because not every guitar player that solos good, comps good, kind of thing. Maybe they don't have as as adept at rhythm, but he was a great rhythm player, comp player, kind of thing. I don't know how they did. Well, Billy said it. He said I didn't tell him what to play. Just
He just looked at him and went, I think he should be able to do this. Or
yeah,
no, he said he just looked like he could.
yeah, that was funny.
And I could see him parsing his words because he was about to make an even more powerful declarative statement. And I
Yeah,
could see he would reel it back in a little bit because he
yeah,
didn't want to be just cliche written and just
yeah.
going. Um, so one thing I wanted, it was in 73, I think, or 72, for like 6 months, CTI Records opened up their own distribution and promotion company. And I actually got the job. I was the Rocky Mountain Region sales and promotion manager for CTI Records. And that's when the Fingers album came out.
Yes, yeah.
And Airto and Flora came to Boulder, played at Tulagi's as Fingers. And I got Tommy and Karen front row seats and gave him a copy of the album with the hole punched in it. And then you say that you were there hanging out listening to music. Would you guys, him developing San Francisco River, do you remember that is because he had that album?
Probably
Or
because
were
I
you
went to that.
or were
I
you
went
in
to that.
you went to
I
that
went to
show
that
too?
gig too.
Okay.
I was there that night too. Somehow that record, Fingers record, because I loved San Francisco River, and so we pulled that off of that album.
Yep.
So well, that makes sense because it was like we should do this, and that he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And there was no like, no, no, So it seems like he was already aware of. I forget that Tommy and Karen had gone to that gig, but I remember that gig.
And
By ear toe. That's how he introduced himself.
and what a great band.
Yeah.
Raul D'Souza, the
The
trombone
Sousa.
player.
Yeah.
Remember him?
I do.
Improvis
I got Ralph hired me to do a tour with him. And he put together this great band. It was Jeff Berlin on bass and John Galutin, who's a great LA pianist. And we rehearsed at SIR and we were going to hit the road, and it never happened. But I keep in touch with Raul. He's sick right now, but
Wow.
he's
Wow.
looking to come back here.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean,
Because
you know,
I picked Airto up at the airport and drove him to Boulder, and
yeah,
he slapped on his thighs out a brand new song. And I was just, and he's right, right next to me. And I had never been exposed to anything like that.
yeah,
And it just
yeah,
blew my mind completely. What a genius
yeah, yeah.
he is. And Davey Amaro, I don't, whatever happened to him? He was the guitar player.
No, I don't know. Yeah,
But you still know Raul. That's unbelievable. Who else
yeah.
could I meet that knows Raul? I don't know.
I know. That's funny that you
Oh, and it blew
brought
my
Raul's
mind.
name up. Yeah,
Improvisational trombone, and he was friggin' great.
yeah,
But there's never been the featured. That may be part of why it didn't get off the ground. I guess because it's like when Column did that demo with Jeremy.
hmm,
Jeremy was a little so much left of center that maybe that
yeah,
is why that never got picked up. This would be
yeah,
great to talk to Billy. I got to see if I can.
yeah.
If I can get
I
Narada, then he can pave the way to Billy.
yeah. Um, Back then, God, I called Boulder the best kept secret. And with all the musical artists that came in through there, stayed for a while, or lived there. And it was all genres: country artists, rock artists, jazz artists. Um, there was a real full musical creative scene in the 70s there that I could call the best kept secret. That only those of us that were there know what that means.
And this is what we get to do with this thing is shine that light on that period in
Yeah.
Boulder. Because, Stills was there, Joe Walsh, um, um, Richie Furay, Poco
Hmm.
wound up being there. I remember when they did the Good Feelin' to Know album, which was supposed to be their big breakout album, and it was a great album. And that's everybody had their Colorado song.
Hmm.
Every band had to have I Love Colorado.
Yeah.
And Richie wrote one of his great anthems, going back to Colorado. And Paul Cotton did that Les Paul kind of dirty solo that was his finest hour.
Hmm.
And I remember being at Tulagi in the afternoon watching them rehearse. And that was pretty special. It was an amazing
Yeah.
time. It really was.
Really was. Really was. I forget the guy who owned the Blue Note there,
Yeah, I
but we
never.
knew who you were talking about. Anyway,
Did you play at the Blue Note?
I did, but I more than I saw everybody that I ever wanted to see there at the Blue Note, and I never had to pay a ticket price because he never charged me admission to come in. It was so great.
You must have been there for the show. I remember being there for Charles Mingus.
Yes, because living in New York, one of my good friends, Danny Richmond, was his drummer. So I got a chance to see Danny, and because they did a couple of different shows while they were in Boulder, not just the Blue Note show. They did something else that was in Boulder, um, and hung out with Danny. I remember I took Danny out for breakfast, and I got food poisoning. I'll never forget it. I had a cheese and broccoli omelet late at night, and I just got so sick, and I got up and went to the bathroom, and I stayed in that bathroom for a really long time until I came out. I was cool enough to come out, and Danny's sitting there, he's like, what? Kind of thing. But uh,
And I remember
that was
it,
really special.
it took Charles like 10 minutes to go from the dressing room to the stage. It seemed like 10 minutes
Yeah,
because he was really
yeah,
wasn't able to walk very well.
yeah, yeah. What a giant composer, American composer, jazz composer, Charles Mingus.
So, somebody, I could. You've played with so many people. Obviously, it's just stunning, and I'm sure we've only mentioned a little handful of them here. So, how are you feeling about just where you're at now?
In the whole COVID times here.
Just in terms of everything, yeah. I mean,
Well, I really am missing the music, gigging, stuff like that, like what we all do. And it's just different now, and we're trying to wade through this until we can get back to some semblance of normalcy and get back to getting together on the music and stuff like that. Uh, Teaching, that's a whole different thing, and I never thought I would be a good teacher, and I've been teaching now for good 15 years, and I got students, and it's great to see some kid blossom, and so that's gratifying and stuff. And And I get those kids that come in and they have ability, and they have something, and that's really rewarding because you have them for a period of time, and then they're going on to something else. Either they're going on to music school or whatever. You know, they're on their way. Just to have them for a period of time just is really gratifying and stuff like that. So I've been doing more of that than I've been doing playing these days. Um, but still trying to keep my feet in, practicing and that stuff to stay to keep my chops up. We're all struggling with trying to keep our chops up and getting enough practice and stuff like that. So it's more these days is practicing little projects and stuff like that. That okay, well, got the time to do it. When people feel comfortable enough to get together and let's record something, you know, kind of thing. So now we're in that stage of, you know, guys have been uncomfortable getting together, you know, kind of thing with the whole COVID thing. So it's either we're all so tired of not being able to get together that now we're like, okay, yeah, let's get together and let's record, you know, let's play some music and stuff like that. So, uh, I mean, I had a great band that I was playing with, and the whole COVID thing shut down my great band, and we're not getting together and haven't gotten together since March. Yeah, since March.
Who was in the band?
There's a young guitarist. Speaking of guitar players, this guy is his name is Andy Waddle, and he's phenomenal. And I'm sure you'll be hearing about this guy some point in the near future. And bass player, he calls himself Dante Fire, and uh, the professor. Uh, God, we haven't seen each other in quite a while. Anyway, uh, guy, he's a professor of jazz studies up at Riverside, there at the college up there, and then we have different piano players, kind of thing that we rotate, or we won't have a piano player at all, is because Andy plays so much guitar that we've been doing guitar, sax, bass, and drums, and then sometimes we'll add a keyboard player in that. But we had a chance to, I don't know, we've been together for as a unit playing over a year, and you really miss those guys, playing with those guys. So we'll get back to it when we get back to it.
And then you've obviously played with Rob Mullins.
Rob Mullins,
What
we go back.
was that from Colorado, right?
Yeah, yeah, we go way back. Actually, his nephew is one of my students now. So been a couple of years he's been with me, kind of thing. Yeah, Rob and I go back to got about 30 years,
Wow.
Colorado, and we had talked about doing something for years, and you know, guys talk about, hey, we need to get together, we need to do this, and it never happens, you know, kind of thing. And it was like situation came up, hey, we need to do something. It's like, okay, well, let's do it. You know, the issue is always the money, you know, kind of thing.
Right.
And I had gotten a couple of investors to invest in the project. It's like, well, okay, Rob, let's do it. We got the money, you know. Um, and so we did that CD project there. I won't do another one with him like that, though, because uh, it was more what Rob knows how to do his recordings, which he has a formula, and I don't want to do that formula. So I won't know formula music kind of thing. But Rob's good at that for his thing. He's good at that.
It's funny. I have my son who's 20, and he's a musical genius, but he just graduated from Denver School of the Arts. Did 6 years of piano, and he's never. Now it's so much harder, and I've really tried to back him up because he just has instant melodies just pour out of him.
Mm-hmm.
He's just so I'd rather improvise,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really pretty amazing. But oh god, there's a reason I'll find the thread. Um, oh, it's because played. We downloaded that CD, the one, and he said, "Oh, it sounds a little bit like elevator music," and that's what you just said. It's a formula, and that's what and I said. Yeah, a lot of that's what elevator music is now.
Yeah.
It's jazz that's more formulaic. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
I just so just interesting that you would say you don't want to do it because it's too much of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was his off the top thought about it, which I think there's a kind
He's
of a
got good ears.
yeah, he has amazing ear. He really
Yeah.
does. So I wanted to dig a little more into when you hung out with Tommy and Boulder and with Karen, and so you were around the two of them together.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
Mm-hmm.
speak a little bit about what you witnessed in terms of their interaction and just the nature of Tommy and Karen?
They seemed really in love at that time. You know, um, they were like best friends. I thought, and I look back on it, and I still think that way that they were best friends, and they were doing something together, and their relationship uh, seemed pretty solid to me at that time. Couldn't imagine them not being together, and
How would it manifest just in terms of they're interchanging, they're going back and forth, silliness or just whatever? Is there any
yeah.
way you can paint a
Well,
little picture of that?
I mean, so the you got to imagine like their lives in Boulder at that time, uh, and their popularity, and everybody, wanting to their their time, kind of thing, and how they navigated that together, kind of thing. And they're two very social people, and um, and they just handled that really well. I used to uh, marvel at how well they navigated that whole scene and all the personalities and uh, stuff like that so well, and then be able to, because I couldn't do that very well. Um, it's like I got to get away. I got to get away and get my own space here, and then I'm okay. Kind of thing. They were able to do that really well, and then people wanting Tommy's time and Karen and but they were a team. They worked well as a team as far as if you pull them away from this guy or it's like or kind of thing. They just seemed like they were working cohesively together for something. She would make his clothes and stuff like that, and just she was such a part of his career at that time. It was a very important part of his career, I thought. Uh, so I was, well, hanging out with them was great. I mean, and just being able to hang out at their place, and it was just us, and that kind of thing. And they were really great. Karen was really great. Kind of thing.
How did really great manifest?
Just
What's the behavior underneath that feeling?
like just like real like there was an authentic thing there, feeling like of friendship and stuff like that, and that they cared, kind of thing, um, was pretty special. And Tommy and Karen, so it was that thing of you know not knowing a lot of people and stuff like that, and but Tommy always included me, which I really appreciated, and introduced me to a lot of people uh, too. I remember he introduced me to Gerard McMahon. I don't know if you know of Gerard.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
GMAC, GMAC.
GMAC, yeah, and uh, started playing with Gerard after Tommy. We were doing. Gerard was doing a lot of commercials for the Southwest market there, and we did a lot of that. And then we did some gigs, with Gerard and stuff like that. And he's still a really good old friend from Colorado that I knew from those days that I met through Tommy. Peter Rodman, another guy who had the radio station upstairs from the Good Earth.
KRNW.
Yeah, still another
Who
guy, is a really good friend that I met through Tommy. Uh,
still stay in touch with Peter?
I do, yeah.
Wow.
Peter actually wrote a couple of really nice reviews for my trio CD that I did. Very generously, didn't ask him to do it, and he's a good friend. He reminded me that I used to, when we were playing at the Good Earth, that either me and Tommy or I would go up there and just hang out in his studio while he's doing his radio show and just going through his record collection. He had such a great record collection.
Do you have any memories of you and Tommy both going up?
Oh yeah, that's how I met Peter, was through Tommy, and it was like, hey, let's go upstairs. There's it's a radio station up there, and let's go up and hang out. So that's how I met Peter, and then I would just go up there, a lot and hang out with Peter because he was such a great guy. Still is.
Um, who else? Who else do you remember?
Billy Hulk, uh,
Yeah,
dear friend.
I want to do this with Billy too.
Billy is one of my very best friends. All these years, still is. And God, there's a lot of people that from that time that I'm still in touch with all these years later.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and Boulder's like still, I mean, like Denver Boulder is still like considered like it's like home, Spent 8 years there and played a lot of music there and met some really great people. It's like life associations, kind of thing. We make it a point to stay in touch with each other and stuff like that.
So did you leave in the early 80s?
I left in summer of '79.
So what was
And
transpiring then that had that
I
happening?
got hired to by Freddie Hubbard
Oh yeah, you mentioned
to
that.
come out to LA and play with him. So, and it was hard to leave Colorado. It was really hard to leave Colorado because I was busy there. I was working a lot. And of course, during that time, it was when the oil crunch happened, if you remember
Yep.
then. So everybody was moving out of Colorado anyway. So I was finally able to make that leap and come out to LA, and it was great. it was a great move. I'd always loved California. Uh, I I lived in San Francisco for just a little bit, but I got a taste of California, and I remembered California was in the back of my mind. Although I went to New York first, which I felt like that's where the jazz scene was, and it was just circumstance. Tommy brought me to Boulder and stayed for 8 years, and then had an opportunity to come to LA and lived there for 25 years or so, and now I moved down to the San Diego area down here, and there's enough of a scene down here to keep you interested, because it's hour and a half from LA, depending on traffic, kind of thing. But you get the musician flow from back and forth, LA and San Francisco.
So you know Kenny Weisberg?
You know what? I sure do, and it's funny because I was playing with this group that was a world class uh, music venue called Anthology in San Diego, and I was in the house band that we were there for. It was about 8 years that it was open from beginning to end, and I walked outside. I was outside the club one night, ran into Kenny Weisberg, and it was really great to see him. And so I haven't seen him since, but I know he's down here, and we are on Facebook together. And another great guy from Colorado, and just we had that thing, that Colorado thing. Used to call it Colorado Mafia out here.
So obviously, when you saw Tommy at Ebbitt's and he had scored before the show, between the time I
Yeah,
got this bear hug because he totally recognized me, and 5 hours later, looking right
yeah,
through
because
it.
I remember you said when you said he recognized you and gave you a big hug, and I was like, well, I was obviously not what we experienced, because I
Well,
was
yeah,
his brother, and you know, he
he
didn't
didn't
recognize
recognize Johnny.
he did not recognize his own brother.
Boy, this was some good shit they scored. Being on the
Obviously,
payphone as I walked out the door, seeing him on the payphone, I go, I know what's going on there. And it's unbelievable that now hear you
yeah,
share that. So within all that, there's there's always been this awareness backed by firsthand stories that that Barry wanted to cash out his investment on Tommy.
I've heard the stories, and I worked with Lanny Garrett, who was with Barry Fay after I worked with Tommy. So it was having to see Barry Fay more, and then my feelings about him at that time were not good. I was just there was nothing that I really had to say to Barry Fay after that.
Yeah, because I don't want to rehash all the circumstantial part,
Yeah.
which is, again, there's this guy, Bob Furbrosh. So we won't go into that now. But do you remember when you heard that Tommy had died?
Yeah, I came back for the funeral, his funeral. Um, I was I was living in Colorado,
Yep.
and took the train back to Sioux City, and
How did
it
you
was a
find?
sad day.
How did you find out?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I that's kind of really vague how I found out.
Were you engaged more with drug usage yourself? Not like Tommy, but I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was.
and so that might have been part of. So what? So you found out, and so what? Do you remember an emotion?
I remember I was really, and I could have talked to Johnny and found out through Johnny, but and then going back to Sioux City, and it was really tough, and I felt really, my emotion was, of course, sadness, but anger. It was. Because being around Tommy, in the Boulder days and seeing how all these guys were hanging around him, and it was almost like the Klingons, that didn't have any good intentions towards Tommy other than to use him just to be around a star. And it made me like, just like I had said earlier, I was like, I'm done with the whole rock scene. That's how I felt about it. Then I felt that strongly about it.
Can you go back to you going to Sioux City and then going to the funeral and just what emotions were in the mix in terms of the anger and everything? But was there a sadness? Was it like some kind of
Definite sadness, yeah, definite sadness. Uh, and being back in Sioux City for a funeral, of someone you knew that from when you were a kid, it was like one of us, you know, uh, life cut short, way short. Um, yeah, it was really sad. It was really sad. I was really sad.
I mean, you and Bartle, I mean, and Johnny, obviously, but Johnny's 2.5 years younger. I mean, you guys, and you specifically had such an unbelievable history in terms of being there, as we talked about earlier. How how does, I mean, certain events happen in life that are just, maybe we're not ready for them, maybe we're not able to really deal with it. But I have to assume that there was something, I don't know how to, exp- you know, that there was some kind of dark, I don't know, just, can you go there? Was there a way to try to add that up to a way of talking about what you lost or what was gone or what happened? Because I know you had just seen him 6 months earlier, and he was obviously
And
opioid involved in
connected to that was shocking, Mike. It was like, how could you not? So it was like, obviously, he was so loaded. And I think, so it was like, well, you know who we are, because, I'm not going to just let you put, like, so we hung there and talked to him. And I swear to God that Tommy said to us that he doesn't know who to trust anymore at that time. And that's the last time I saw Tommy alive. And so with that, it made it all the more painful uh, for him and then to hear the backstory or stories, that's where the anger came from. Uh, it was totally tragic. And I know I know that Tommy had to take responsibility for some of that. Just in my own drug usage, I got to take responsibility for that. Uh, and can't change, can't change it. I wish he had had people around him that could have helped him to change that. It's possible. It's possible for me, you know. So it just didn't happen, and that was really tragic and really hard to take. Really hard to take. I mean, I took it really hard. Can believe it, and it was hard to look at Barry Fay after that, and I would just, if he entered the room, I just kind of leave the room. He would recognize me. It's like, I've seen that face before, kind of thing. I don't know if he'd even, put together that my relationship with Tommy, or that I even played with Tommy. It was just a face that he recognized or something like that, and that didn't look back on him so favorably, kind of thing. Yeah, it was tough. I still, think of. I think we all do what would have been possible, the possibilities for Tommy, and without the drugs and all that stuff, he was a great guy. He was a great guy.
So, when you were there in Boulder, when you first got out there and you were hanging out with them a lot, were they openly affectionate? Were they playfully affectionate? Was that
Yeah, they were very playful together and affectionate and affectionate. They would, hold hands. Karen would always, run her fingers through his hair. She was always, doing something, or measuring him for something, an outfit or something like that. But yeah, they were um, affectionate, very affectionate couple. I thought they had a good relationship for the period of time that they were together, and especially at that time, I think.
so? Did you remember nicknames?
Oh, I do something kind of. Now that you mention that, Tommy called her Carrie Bear. I forget what her nickname was for him.
She's mentioned a few to me.
Yeah.
I don't remember them off the top of my head. Did he just call you Russell? If he
Let me
saw,
see. And I know he had a nickname for me. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the nickname. I know there was one. I can't remember the nickname. Pretty much, it was Russell. Yeah.
so here you had such a unique connection with him from such an early age. That night when you went into the dressing room and he didn't remember you, is there a way to go back and express what that feeling was?
It was just a feeling of, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's like, and I'm just obviously recognizing that he was pretty high, like higher than I'd ever seen him. And I'd seen him pretty high.
So had you met Narada before, or
No, that was my first time meeting him.
did you have connection with him over the years at all?
No, I just met him that one time, I think. Uh, okay, I talked to him once in LA. at SIR, rehearsing there for something, and the alumni of drummers that played with Tommy Bolin, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, like some of the greatest drummers who've been recognized as such
Yeah,
in the past 50 years.
yeah.
And what about Bobby? Let's talk about your sense of just Bobby as a drummer and what his piece with Simpatico with Tommy, what perspective you have about Bobby.
Love talking about Bobby. Uh, so I think I was still in Sioux City when Zephyr was, and during the time when Bobby was playing
Yeah.
with Zephyr, and then Energy,
Yep.
more so Energy, and and I loved Bobby's playing. He was like a solid drummer, and and I told Bobby this. It was like he was inspirational in me having a career playing drums because I really dug what he was doing. He was playing with one of my good buddies, you know. They had a great band, and and I really dug what he was doing. And uh, then when I moved to Colorado, then I started to get a chance to know Bobby a little bit. And he was we call him big headed. Bobby's not big headed kind of guy, where he was accessible and we could talk, and being that we played the same instrument, and even more so that Tommy had asked me to come and play in his place for a period of time, and then we ended up playing together as two drummers on it, and how well we worked together and allowed each other space and stuff like that. Figured out how to play with Bobby, kind of thing. It's okay. You drive on this one and I'll ride shotgun. Well, okay, I'll drive and now you ride shotgun on different tunes and stuff like that. Otherwise, it's just totally chaotic. And then I saw Bobby, um, and this was not even on a musical thing, it was more personal thing was we had a mutual friend who was Mary Stewart. And Bobby was in LA working with Mary Stewart. She was in Zephyr at one of those stages. Um, and Bobby was really down, more down, and I was to the point where I was really worried about Bobby. And we talked for a long time, and we just hung out, and I was just like, couldn't let him go because I was like really worried about him. And I was like, man, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Is it? But I'm worried about you. And I came out of that.
Was this after Tommy died?
Yeah,
Yeah, I got to imagine that rudder. And I remember the late '90s, and we're going to do this with Bobby too. But he, his story was that Tommy was so crazed with the drug usage, and that Bobby was trying to keep up with him. And just like you said, you went time out. I can't even go there.
yeah,
And then that's when Bobby couldn't finish Private Eyes, and
yeah.
they brought Carmine in to do the one song. And Carmine's been quoted as saying, "I didn't think he was going to make it." And that album was exactly what it was supposed to be. Columbia Records, so we need an album that we can get a lot of airplay on. And Tommy, as impaired as he was that summer with Dennis Mackay and how quickly they did that record, he delivered exactly what they needed,
Mm,
which was the album that could open up the doors to radio airplay with
mm,
Columbia, whatever the payola thing was.
yeah,
And it, because he did that show in Detroit, the last show Johnny did in October '76. And clearly Detroit had been playing him. And he never got a lot of airplay until the last 3 months of his life. And that was where Norma was from. And the crowd on that recording is like they are into Tommy Bolin. And it's the only recording like that where there's a really big crowd and they're into it. And so the tragic part is what happened.
Yeah,
But the reality is he was on the verge. If he could have just, like, say, flipped the switch and clean him up. And the rumor I always heard was that Fleetwood Mac was doing a huge stadium tour the next summer to support their new album, Rumors, and that Tommy was going to be the opening act, but never got there. So that leads into, okay, assuming that had happened and he lived and all of a sudden he blew up and he becomes a real live touring an act that can draw and make money and become a superstar.
yeah,
And then he would have had freedom to do what he wanted to do. What I've
yeah,
always felt he would have followed the Santana model. That he would have done, okay, here's the album for rock radio, and here's what I want to do.
sure.
So do you have I mean, I'm
I
sure
agree.
I'm sure you've hypothesized about this.
Yeah, I agree with you on that because I felt like he had so much different kinds of music to explore. Why not? My question is, why not explore it? If he would have had the opportunity to reach that status, and he was certainly on his way, that that's why it's like can only imagine what he'd be doing, kind of thing, musically. And yeah, I mean, I've seen it over and over and over again. Uh, Playing music, how drugs can rob people of everything, everything. You can't have enough, you know, to avoid it. It's taken so many people down, so many great musicians, artists, taking them down. But when you were mentioning about Tommy Bolin, it's funny how I'll meet someone totally unrelated from our relationship from music, except I'm a musician. Yeah, I play with Tommy Bolin. You play with Tommy Bolin? Yeah, and it's like, Tommy Bolin, you listen to Tommy Bolin, just like love Tommy Bolin, could look like some suburban mom, grandmother now, uh, big Tommy Bolin fan. So that's always so funny to me, kind of thing that how many people are out there listening.
So do you have an opinion about how somebody does develop themselves to where it could be justified to put the label of genius on them, which is thrown around, it gets used very casually. And my sense is that it's actually not that common in music that somebody actually is a full on, whatever that means, but just has something that just is not common. It's rare.
Yeah.
How many, I mean, what's your sense about what Tommy, within his creative peak, what that meant? Was he that? And you've played with so many amazing people, and maybe this is a little bit overblown, but or maybe not. What's your take on
Um, what's really unique about Tommy is I don't know about the genius part, but his longevity, even after his death, is really remarkable. and it's getting passed down in generations, which is really remarkable. So not everybody makes that footprint, kind of thing in their career, and so is there a genius in that? You could say yes. Um, so that being said, um, he could be considered in as a genius of sorts, kind of thing. Just in the totality of his what he left is in his music, and it'll live on, I think. Uh, so more than he's immortal, and I'd feel better about saying that than anything like categorizing him as a genius or not a genius, kind of thing. I don't know.
What you've played with so many people, and you've been close up with so many brilliant, gifted, experienced musicians, which I judge you're one of them. Um, what makes up? What are the ingredients that need to be there for somebody to leave the kind of footprint, like you said, Tommy left? And if you have witnessed before a musician who just everybody, other musicians all just go, really? Well,
Yeah. Uh,
what do you put in the soup? What needs to be in that soup that then becomes what he was?
we'll just let's just say, like, let's just pick guitar player, you know, and and a good guitarist with great ability coupled with creativity and imagination coupled with passion to persevere through all this stuff and people telling you can't do this, you can't do that, and but you're driven to do it, kind of thing, and then coupled with uh, uh, circumstance, fate, whatever you want to call that, kind of stars align, kind of thing, and you're able to then uh, ride that, work that to your advantage to be able to then start to set and achieve some of your goals, kind of thing. That's all the day to day, putting one foot in front of the other kind of stuff, going to the studio, going to the gig, um, kind of thing. Now you're playing bigger gigs, you're making a little more money, kind of thing. You're getting known by more people are noticing you and recognizing that um, there's something that they like about you. Or there's something they admire about you, or it was like, how do you do what you do? We love what you do, kind of thing. To that you have a signature sound that uh, you not everybody you can turn on the record or turn on the music and say that's Tommy Bolin or that's so and so. Not everybody's got that. That's signature sound, kind of thing. And all those components not everybody, the very few people get that, kind of thing. I mean, there's some great musicians who nobody even knows who they are, and
Yeah.
they were somebody's teacher who turned out to be famous, kind of thing. So all those things that line up uh, for you to be able to and what's remarkable about Tommy, and this could be an argument for geniuses, how much he was able to put into a short life. He did a he put a lot of music together in a short life that some people don't put together in a whole career lifetime of, and that was his short lifetime. But he recorded a lot of music. He did a lot of playing. Uh, I probably haven't heard it all.
So one of my theories is that he had a unique emotional quality in how he was able to play, and he could touch emotion through how he was manipulating the strings and how he was playing, and that this is not common or it feels like it's his soul talking versus just I've learned how to play and I'm great.
Yeah,
But it's more like you're listening to somebody's soul coming through how they're playing. What does it take for a musician to be able to elicit that, which I judge as ultra high praise, to be able to just feel like it's somebody's soul speaking? But what does that take to be able to do that?
it certainly did. You can't, um, because so many people feel that way about Tommy's music that that's unpredictable, you know? Uh, that's pretty remarkable. That's the mark of an of a remarkable artist, you know? Because it's all about, do I like it? I don't like it. That sounds good to me. That doesn't sound good to me. I don't care about that. I like that. Kind of thing. That the emotion and meaning that we all have different things that we like, we dislike, and uh, he he was a he was a fusion guitarist pioneer, jazz rock pioneer. He was like one of the first guys. Every guitar player that I've ever talked about is like Tommy Bolin. Oh yeah, you know. Uh, and there's some great guitar players saying that, kind of thing. And he was one of the first.
Do you remember having any awareness of how Rich, his dad, was a supporter of
Yeah,
Tommy? This is one of the ingredients. I've been doing this research, and it's like you gotta have a parent or parents that are like, "I believe in you," and then
yep,
go that extra mile.
yep.
What did Rich, in that way, from what you understand, what was he like in terms of the way he supported Tommy?
If he had to pack up gear for the band and drive them to wherever, that was Rich. It was like, whatever you need, let's do it. Let's get it done. Rich would be on Tommy about practicing and you know stuff like that. He was very connected to um, him uh, being able to. He was his supporter. He was his Tommy's nurturer up to the point where, okay, now I'm the supporter, and now it's like, you want to quit high school and take off and go chase your dream, you know, go do it, son. Rich was that kind of pops, I remember we were getting together over at the Bolin Manor there. And
What street was that on?
God, I forget what street they lived on before Court Street, but I can visualize in my mind the house, and I believe it was on the north side of Sioux City.
And it had a basement, right?
Yeah,
Which is where the drum. That's what Johnny was saying. They had a
yeah,
basement. You could have the drum kit.
yeah. And Tommy would drag all his buddies over, to hang out, and Kiki would, cook food and stuff like that. I remember these meatballs. I don't know what they were. She used to cook, and everybody really didn't like them so much. And a couple of guys had stuffed them down in the couch, into the cushion of the couch.
Kiki is Kiki mom. Who's Kiki?
That's Mom.
Oh,
Yeah,
mom. That was her nickname.
yeah. They were both great. Rich was a character. He was definitely a huge supporter of whatever it took for Tommy to, do what he did,
Did were you aware that back then that Rich also drank?
I don't know if I was so much aware of that. And maybe I just wasn't thinking about that, and just accepted Rich if he was if he was drunk or had a few, and whatever his personality was like. And that was Rich, just that's pretty much how I saw it.
So who might have been there coming into the basement to play?
Well, I know the core was the Larvics, Bartle, Roger Rothwell, and then there's some guys that I really didn't know that well, but I know of some of the names escape me.
Did you know Brad Miller?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Brad Miller. Actually, I think Brad Miller was in that band Patch of Blue.
And then he got fired, and
Yeah.
then he moved to Denver. And that's what Johnny says is he was that Tommy knew Brad was in Denver, and that he could, in going to Denver, that Brad was there,
Yeah, yeah,
and that was part of the safety net
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
Did you ever jam in the basement there?
I remember being over at the Bolin household, and probably, I mean, it was everything was like centered around music. Either we were playing it, or talking about it, or going to hear it, kind of thing. Yeah, Sioux City was great for that, and again, small community and small musicians community. And I didn't play with everybody, but I knew of a lot of the guys. But my good buddies were the Bolins and Bartle and the Larvics, and so I pretty much met a lot of musicians that were in Sioux City and in and around Sioux City, apart from the people that were playing at my grandfather's club or coming through there. my first band was, and this was in grade school, started in grade school, was a band with Jerry Smith. We called ourselves the Junior Jivers. And it was just me and Jerry, organ and drums. And then we started getting some, we got, we had, Tommy played with us for a little bit. Bartle played with us for a little bit.
Wait a minute. How old is this?
We were
Sixth
in grade
grade?
school. God, it's like
Oh,
maybe like sixth, seventh grade, eighth grade. I don't know, something like that.
so, yeah, 10. Well, the sixth grade would have been, what, 12, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah, well, 11, 12 kind of thing.
Because that's what Johnny said, that Harlem's Children was Jerry Smith and somebody else. He
Yeah.
mentioned, I'm not remembering the name. So,
Hmm.
so Jerry was a
Yeah,
key
Jerry.
key cog.
Yeah, and Jerry was my buddy. Now his dad was my dad's buddy. They played together. His dad played piano. My dad was a drummer. Harold Smith was senior, and then Harold Smith Jr. was a B3 player, and he played with my oldest brother who was playing drums. And then me and Jerry were close in age, and we played together, kind of thing.
So was there? I mean, I'm getting the impression here, just how this is, and then talking to Johnny, that all the people that were into the contemporary kind of thing as young kid musicians, that you guys all just gravitated together. Was there
Yeah.
anybody else that wasn't in there? I mean, in terms
God.
of anybody who had any chops at all.
Well, I mean, yeah. Uh, there was a guitarist named Glenn Reitzma, also early friend of Tommy Bolin's, who turned out to be um, probably the most uh, educated guitarist. Uh, moved to Chicago. Uh, but yeah, there were guys that I'm missing that I'm not remembering.
Does Glenn, is that, is he, do you have any connect or awareness of him still being alive or not?
Yes, actually, because for the last 10 years of doing the Bolin Festival, I've always had Glenn as the guitarist. So Glenn comes back once a year to play um, with
So
me.
would this be a good contribution to this?
I'm sure he's got some good recollections of Tommy back then.
Because this a month and a half ago, it was a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell was going on in Sioux City? And now we're like a freight train going downhill,
Mm-hmm.
which is really exciting. And and Russell, I mean, so yeah, if I would love to.
I will text you Glenn's phone number. I'll just run it past Glenn, tell him that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
But that, yeah, I mean, and John Bartle's going to do it. And Bobby's, getting warmed up. He's coming close. But the fact Johnny did it and we just hit it out of the park, that's going to resonate for sure.
yeah. Well,
But and now
my
that you're,
girlfriend is my girlfriend is going. Hey, what's going on with you?
well, I think I am satiated. You are just unbelievable, Russell. And
The time is just. It's been. I looked at the clock and recognized we've been talking for quite a while. It just seems like we could just keep talking.
I've told I'm the instigator in chief, and it's kind of like I had when I did my music video concert thing, one of the things I was really proud of was what a good interviewer I was. And so I've done this a lot, but this is
Yeah.
different. This is like, how do we go down into the cracks?
Yeah.
Not the broad questions, but can we really get into being able to build a narrative that's personal and deep? And,
Yeah.
Russell, you are the man. I can't wait to
Well,
be.
Mike, I remember when I was doing this, my Tommy Bolin tribute CD, and I had to make calls to all the people that I could get permission to record some of the songs that I recorded. And I called you, and you were so helpful. And I don't think we really ever really
We,
interacted, you know.
we
Uh,
hadn't, and I've been, to be honest with you, I've kind of had my own personal renaissance here in the past few years. I was a very shut down person who always tried to make miracles happen to make myself feel good about myself. And I've found, pause this here. We're going to be done here in a second, but I want us to pause this.